Buenas dan mananasidus talo. We're back in session here. This is the Committee of the Whole of the 30th Guam Legislature on the Committee on Appropriations. Before us for continued discussion is Bill number 58 as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations relative to providing the appropriation levels and expenditures for the operations of the Government of Guam and its branches for FY 2010. Yesterday, we concluded our discussion on Chapter 2, Part 4, Section 2, and we've completed both A and B of Section 2. This morning, we'll proceed with discussion on Section 3, and this is the chapter and part of the University of Guam. Section 3 is the appropriations for the Aquaculture Development and Training Center. And this is an appropriation level of $131,846 is appropriated to the general fund for fiscal year 2010 for the sole purpose of funding the continued operations of the Aquaculture Development and Training Center. And this is the Fadian hatchery, folks, in which they're doing some work down there with the production of shrimp larvae and some research, of course, that occurred down there relative to aquaculture and other industries related to the production of food using that technology. Any comments? Senator Ogden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, you know, when we initially looked at transferring this particular Aquaculture Development and Training Center many years ago, I believe it was 6 or 7 years ago, we were thinking about transferring it over to the University of Guam with the objective of continuing the local funding support until such time that this facility is able to maintain itself financially and become self-sustaining. Now, my question, I guess, is because I'm looking at the same figure that has been repeatedly appropriated every single fiscal year. I think it's always been in the neighborhood of about $131,000, and that would take care of personnel and perhaps some portion of operations. Yes. Now, I guess my question, and I'm glad to see that a subsequent section would require a reporting mechanism for all of the program revenues and expenditures, but that was one of the concepts that was advocated at that point in time, and it was acknowledged by representatives from the University of Guam that in fact they were going to work towards becoming self-sustaining, not only through the operational revenues through the sale of, like you mentioned, the larvae and the shrimp and the fish, but just as importantly to be able to go out and aggressively pursue federal grants. So I guess my leading question is, how far along are they? And this is not an oversight, Mr. Chair and Mr. Speaker, and I understand that. It's just that I think that perhaps in the future, I need to follow up and perhaps the legislative body on that premise that this was relocated and reassigned from the defunct Commerce to GETA, and then over to the University of Guam with that notion in mind, that in fact it was going to eventually become self-sustaining. And, you know, at one point in time, this was a world-renowned facility that was disease-free. And I don't know what their status is today, but it certainly is providing some critical services to our local community. And I want to recognize that, but I am also interested in terms of how much they're able to generate in terms of the sales and the overall operations. But, Mr. Speaker, I don't think that's necessary to respond to right now, knowing full well that they're going to continue to receive the appropriate appropriation. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Ogden. I don't have the exact figures at this time, but I do know that additional activity occurs there and that they have been able to generate additional grants and support from other grants and other work within the University of Guam. So, all right. Any comments, amendments on this section? If not, we'll proceed then to Section 4, which is appropriation for WIRI, which is Guam's hydrological study, and the amount is $192,307. And again, this is to the University of Guam for the hydrological study, which studies, of course, the water tables on Guam, the aquifer, and it is administered by the Water and Environmental Research Institute at the University of Guam. Any comments? Any amendments? If not, we'll proceed then to Section 5, which is another appropriation to the Water, Environmental, and Research Institute for the Comprehensive Water Resource Monitoring Program. And this is in conjunction really with the hydrological study that they do. and the two programs work in tandem. But this is the one that monitors water production, etc., and the safe and environmental effects of other matter development and so forth, affecting our water resource. So, any additional comments? If not,
I just have a
yes.
inquiry on this, if I will. We have provisions in both Section 4 and Section 5 stating that such funds shall not be transferred or used for any other purpose. And they're both going to Weary for different programs. And my question is, do they have good enough tracking mechanisms, good enough accounting mechanisms, and are they giving us the monthly reports? Does this fall into the monthly report categories that we get from various agencies?
Yes, we're putting that, the accounting of the expenditure of the funds are done by the University of Guam. And in the past, this provision was put in the past because, of course, when you appropriate to the University of Guam, it had all been in a lump sum and not part of the operational budget. And members of the body at that time felt that these programs were important enough that they were for a specific purpose granted to the University of Guam, and rather than University of Guam switching or cutting down the funding for these programs, the Water and Environmental Research Institute approached the legislature, and we began earmarking the appropriation specifically to that purpose and only for that purpose. And we do require the reporting requirements in terms of the activity and the expenditures, yes.
Okay, so this is going to fall under the university's monthly reporting requirements that come to us in these emails every month.
Yeah,
and it'll be
that's
detailed
correct.
out.
That's correct. They're in those reports.
Fantastic. Because I mean, I'm sure we all know how important Weary is and our aquifer is to all the people of Guam, and monitoring this and clean water for everybody, and we want to make sure that this program gets the funding it needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Section 6 is the appropriation to the College of Natural and Applied Sciences, and this appropriation is earmarked for the Northern and Southern Water Conservation District programs, and they're equally divided. This program supports the farmers and the work of the University of Guam in providing some technical expertise to the farmers. The Soil and Water Conservation District used to be outside and had its own entity, but because of the work that they've had in terms of cooperating with the University of Guam and the extension program there, a decision was made in the past and continues to be proposed to do so, that we house the district at the University of Guam. They're supported by the University of Guam additionally in terms of staff and expertise, and this has been a good working relationship. So the appropriation is for $157,720. Any other comments? If not, the University of Guam, the appropriation is made for the public radio program or entity at the University of Guam. It's housed on their campus, and the appropriation is made to support the activities of public radio in Guam. This is the same appropriation as last year. No comments? No. Senator Cruz.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just looking at the list that you have from the University of Guam. Is the extension service just part of the regular part of the university, doesn't have a specific?
That's correct. The extension service is part of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, and it's part of the budget of the University of Guam in addition to federal grants they get. So there's no special appropriation for the extension service.
In this budget, with the additional cash that your new revenue shows, is there a possibility of providing additional money for the rhino beetle? Because you know TAF is going down for the next year.
That's correct.
And the $500,000 that you and Senator Espaldon had appropriated to the rhino beetle eradication effort has been released by GVB.
Right.
But I don't see any money in here for rhino beetle eradication at all. And I'm a little concerned. I don't want us to go back and think that TAF is the,
right.
is the black hole from which we can pull things out of, and so please, if there's a possibility that we can have some money set aside for the rhino beetle eradication, because they got their last 300 2 weeks ago, and
That's right.
if either one of you is planning on an appropriation for them again in this next fiscal year because it hasn't been eradicated, it would seem to me that somewhere in here is where that should be, or at least a specific amount being set aside for it.
I don't disagree with you. We met with Roland Kitugwa, not specifically on the rhino beetle, but because on the water and soil conservation, because he's on the board. When we were talking about their appropriation, we asked him about that, about the additional money, whether it was released or not, the additional 300, and at that time he said it was not, but that he was working with you on it and so forth, and so and then he of course informed us that it had been released, so they have the entire amount that will take them through a large portion of this fiscal year in terms of their budget and their planned program, and he did not request additional money for this fiscal year. I think what they're doing is that, remember when we were trying to in the veto message, the Lieutenant Governor said he was working with the federal government for additional grants and so forth, so that 300,000 release would be able to bridge them until all their applications and hopefully approval for additional federal grants. No guarantees, but they feel pretty confident that they'll be able to secure some additional federal grants. And I think that if that doesn't happen, then we can come back at a later time. But we could try to find additional money, and I would support trying to find additional money for rhino beetle.
That's what I thought, because I thought Roland worked for one of these.
Yeah, he did, on the soil and
And
water
so
pension.
when I looked at it, and there was no, this is considerably less than the 500 that you grabbed from TAF for
Yeah.
the rhino beetle, and
Yeah.
if
They just didn't.
we
they
should
didn't-
provide some money
Yeah.
for them because it's just.
Again, they didn't ask for it, and I think they are relying on the fact that the federal lieutenant governor promised them that he will make federal funds available to them. But they needed that cash right away to bridge them because they had nothing. You know, they were promised the federal grant. It didn't come through your efforts and Spodon and ourselves. We were able to tap some of the TAF for the immediate need, and they gave it. And so that's been able to take them. And again, I think they're probably relying on the federal funds that they have been putting in for.
I just wanted to put it on the record.
Yes.
My concern, and also the fact that cash cow
Is gone.
is gone.
Yeah.
She's died, and or at least emaciated right now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senator. Section 8 is the appropriation to the Capital Improvement Project Fund. This appropriation comes out of the Territorial Highway Fund, and this is the general fund support for the new Jesus and Wenya building at the School of Business at the University of Guam, and this is reflected in the debt service that you see in the front portion. So this is the legislature's contribution towards that capital fund towards the debt service. Program revenue and expenditure reports. These are the reports that we're requiring for the appropriations. A lot of the miscellaneous appropriations that you see to the University of Guam that were not part of the base operating budget, those reports are required to be filed. Senator Uggan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Just perhaps it's a question of semantics or presentation, but I had alluded to a little earlier about another program that's being administered out of the University of Guam, the Aquaculture Development Training Center.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'd like to see in this particular report is that all of the funding and all of the expenditures be all inclusive, regardless as to whether it's non-appropriated funds, whether they're generating it on their own based on their operations, or whether they're getting it out of general fund. So, Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence and the consideration of our colleagues, the way this reads could conceivably be interpreted as providing a report on all general fund appropriations that is incorporated into this budget measure, aside from the non-appropriated funds from their operations. So if I can just request an amendment, a one-word amendment on line 15, right after quarterly, to insert the word and make it consistent with the title, program. So between the word quarterly and revenue, to insert the word program, so that would be all-inclusive of whatever your program revenues are and your expenditures. That should be reflected in the report, not necessarily only general fund that is allocated in this budget, please.
Understood. The amendment by Senator Uggan would be on line 15 of page 25. After the word quarterly, add the word program, so it reads quarterly program revenue and expenditures, etc. Any objection to the amendment? No objections?
Thank you, Mr.
That
Speaker.
amendment carries. Okay. The program annual reports, again, these are not only do we require the quarterly reports, but the annual reports as well. Senator Taitigui.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair. I have a question. Actually, it probably would have been better if I asked this in Section 5, but I see the opportunity here in Section 9 that we're on right now. It's regarding WERI. As I'm told that WERI's responsibilities, one of them include doing the inspection of water that is distributed through companies like Payless, where they distribute the water, Best Water, scenarios like that. And my question is, do you know if they charge a fee when they go out to do these inspections? And it might be under here where we are requiring them a physical report for expenditures and revenues in regards to this, but I've asked several of my colleagues and they didn't seem to know where it was, but it was a good question to bring up. Do you know of any of this?
This is just based on my interaction, because I buy water. And I look at that sign and it says inspected by WERI. And I've had conversations with the owners of the establishment, and they tell me that they pay a fee for that inspection. I don't see it in the, so I couldn't tell you that. At least that's what one of them has indicated to me. So my assumption would be that there's a small fee given for the analysis of that private activity that that service they provide for private entities. So, but I couldn't guarantee that that is reflected in the reports that we get. So, but we will, we've had our staff looking at that, asking the University of Guam to provide the definitive answer on that.
Because as I look on Section 5, when we were appropriating the $163,000,
Right. Yes.
now does this mean that this has to come from the government to in federal funding, or can we use those fees as a matching fund, matching revenue toward their grants? I'm seeing Rhino Beetle over here, to use that money, for that.
My understanding on the monitoring program is that these are some studies that they do with regards to the water tables, and whether we're over pumping the water tables, salt infiltration, and it's in, like I said, it's in tandem with the hydrological study, and may not be for the purpose of doing these water distribution and water businesses that sell. But again, when I talked to the owner of one of the establishments, he said, he gets inspected by WERI. They take a sample of the water, they provide him back the samples and the report, and that they pay a fee for that purpose of getting that certification. So, but we will, again, we are researching that, and we'll get the definitive answer from the University of Guam.
Okay. During this budget hearing,
yes,
we'll be
during
able
this
to.
budget
Okay,
hearing. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senator Taitigui. Scholarship, financial assistance, and other reports. Once again, this continues to require the expenditure reports of these different programs. So, any comments or amendments to that section? If not, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll proceed then with Part 5 of Chapter 2, which is the appropriation for the Guam Community College. The Guam Community College appropriation level is set at $13,278,499 from the general fund to support the operations for fiscal year 2010. The requested amount by the college was about $17,157,000, and the OFB recommendation for GCC operations was to increase the governor's request. The governor's request was 13,278,000, and we increased on the general fund side a slight increase of 13,378,000. In addition to that, we're providing an additional 2.4 million, as we stated in the past, with the Manpower Development Fund to the college to supplement the operations of the college at the on their campus. The apprenticeship program, it will be funded out of that, both stipends and administration. And then the balance of that, we have authorized additional flexibility because the apprenticeship program basically operates at less than the amount. The original amount set for the GCC rather was 800,000 from the Manpower Development, and we've increased that amount to their share based upon the new revenues that were adopted and approved by Department of Labor and the Governor's Office and BBMR on the revenue for that category. And so the total appropriation then for the Guam Community College would be the additional $2.4 million. So any questions or comment on section 1? The first section, A, is of course their operation, which is a slight increase. The LPN, Vocational Guidance Program, gets funded at $644,209. Any comments on that? The appropriations to their lodging and management program, this is for the Pro Start program.
You were a little quick on that.
Okay, all right.
If I can go back and talk just a little bit about the college LPN and vocational guidance programs,
Yeah.
and what an incredibly valuable service that is to the people of Guam. We recently gave a whole bunch of TB tests to folks in the public school system, and that was lots of these young students came out. And you know, we always have a shortage of nurses on Guam, and this program helps to train nurses and facilitate it, and it's something that we need to do and keep investing in. And I think, was this the figure that they requested, that GCC requested?
The GCC request on that, according to the records, was actually a decrease of, the GCC request was 564,000, and this was increased, I believe, by
80,000.
yes. The GCC in their request was 564. The governor actually had allocated in his budget request 644, and that's what we went with. So it's a more than, from what our records reflect, of the request. So we did increase this a little, or the governor increased it, and we concurred with that increase.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay. Senator Spodon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you initially opened discussion on this section, in this chapter, Part 5 on Guam Community College, you said that the request was for $17 million. I just wanted to make sure that the $17 million, is that all inclusive, all the figures that are on all the items listed here all the way through D? For operations, I mean.
No, it did not include the program funding for the LPN and the Manpower Development Fund.
It did not.
It did not.
So in essence, there's almost a variation of about $4 million, you're saying, between $17 million to $13 million for its operations?
Yeah.
Is that?
That's correct.
That's correct?
Yes.
And how do we justify that?
Basically, we started with their base operating budget this year. They wanted an additional $5 million for additional programs, additional growth, some initiatives, and the budget level just is not able to support their current base plus another 4 or 5 million. So what we've been able to do is at least we weren't able to increase their base, but we were able to increase their program funding in the other area of the Manpower Development Fund. So it increased then the total resources by about $1.7 million. So we gave them 1.7 above their current operating budget, and so we've increased their total budget for this year they're operating, but we could not, with the budget level, give them everything that they asked for. Just as the University of Guam, for example, asked for, I think, 38 or 39 million, and we just couldn't give them that. But we did give them a significant increase above this. Plus, of course, their portion of the ARA funding will allow them to continue to fund some of the programs that they were asking for in that increase, and so we're working with them on that.
Okay, so and thank you for that, and it makes sense. But just to clarify on that $13.2 million for operations, then we're basically giving them more than this fiscal year's budget.
Yes.
1.7 million, I think you stated, something in that neighborhood.
Yeah, because the 2.4 from the original Manpower Development Fund was about 800, and we're giving them an additional 2.4 instead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, and the ARA, just for your note, ARA funds, for example, will cover, like the University of Guam, we built in capital equipment in their budget that was going to be paid for local funds. They looked at the ARA funding in addition to their other initiatives, but what is in the current requests that can be covered with ARA funding. So they were able to identify $498,000 that we appropriated as part of that base for capital equipment. And now that is now being funded by ARA, but we're keeping that money in their budget, and they can reprogram that. So that's an additional $500,000 they're able to spend on other initiatives and other costs within the college there. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are now on the lodging program, Pro-Start program. This is out of the Tourist Attraction Fund, and it supports what they call the Pro-Start program. This is a program that's run by, I think this is Barry Mead at GCC, one of the most successful programs. It sends some of our students off island for competition. I think we've won like second or third place in the last couple of years in these national competitions. Senator Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Manana Sidus, I would be remiss if I didn't chime in and support the efforts that you had just mentioned, being a part of the program, being a part of GCC. We've definitely had the opportunity to go off island and did win a couple of awards, and it's programs like that that continue to give our students the opportunity to step into different job opportunity, careers, and rise to the occasion. And I support the efforts and this section, and I'd just like to thank you for working close with them to making sure that this program is still with the community college. So, Sidus Masi.
Thank you very much. Senator Rector.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too have to compliment the faculty and staff of the community college on just doing a phenomenal job educating students, as they have in the past and always do. And yet, I still have to wonder about the results of this program. While we are using public funds to train our people to be lodging management and employees, productive employees of hotels on this island, do we have any figures as to how many of our people that have come through this program have actually become hotel managers on Guam?
I don't have the actual numbers, but I do know that we got at least.
I'm asking you.
The question again is?
I'm asking how many of our people that have gone through this program and gotten this training have become management level at a hotel on Guam and received a decent middle-class income comparable to the off-island managers that I run into at most of the hotels on Guam.
Well, let me just give you Senator Barnes.
I don't know the actual numbers, but we can get that from GCC. Mrs.
Okay.
Okada has the numbers sometime, but just based on the last presentation they had at GCC, I can think of 4 names. I don't know if they want to be announced, but yes, there are students who've gone on, finished the program, and then are in the hotels as chefs, managers, and administrators within the different hotels. I know there's one at Reef Hotel. There's a couple at the Outrigger with Sam Choi's, and one with the local restaurant right now. So yeah, I do know that based on the last presentation that was done at Agana Shopping Center, there was very many accolades to the students and to the administrators giving back to the program that they just had graduated from, and also coming back from places like Disneyland and working their contracts there and competing there, and also placing there in competition within not just the nation but within the world region. So based on that, I can call Mary right now.
That would be helpful. We would appreciate your assistance on that. Senator Rector?
My point isn't that GCC does a phenomenal job educating students. They obviously, when they go off and are in these contests and win lots of awards, it's a phenomenal thing. My point is, this is basically a job subsidy program. The people of Guam invest money in GCC to train our people to get good jobs in our economy. This is the way it's supposed to work. This is good economics. Now, the question is it good economics? Now, and if people think it is, then good, we can show the numbers, right? It's my understanding, as Barry Mead happens to be a good friend of mine, that many of the people that we train in this program leave our island so that they can get a better paying job. They leave our island and go work in hotels in Las Vegas, they go work in hotels in Hawaii, they go work somewhere else. So what we're doing is we're investing our money, taxpayers of Guam money, in training people for other folks' economies. Job subsidy programs are supposed to benefit our economy, not benefit the economy of Hawaii and Las Vegas or New York or Washington, D.C. It's supposed to be benefiting our economy. And so I would really like to see these figures on all these job subsidy programs, and how are they actually producing good living wage middle class jobs for our people. And I'm glad that the good senator is making those phone calls right now to find out if we have any real numbers on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Senator Espodan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, I understand to a degree what the previous speaker is the point he's trying to make, but one of the things he brought out is, okay, we're training them in the lodging industry, but they could eventually end up in other areas and not contributing to their economy. First of all, let's take a look at what the sum we're talking about. We're talking about $24,000. $24,000 to help some students. Now, if there are job opportunities elsewhere that can help them make more money for their families, that is the role of education. We have given our people the ability to go out and find the best jobs available so they could provide for their families. If that argument that the previous speaker stands, then we should also question the LPN programs, the nursing programs, because we all know full well that the pay for nurses off-island is much more than we pay them on-island. And so by extending that argument, we can say that maybe we shouldn't even be funding those programs as well. But the bottom line is a matter of education for our people so they can provide for their families no matter where the jobs are. We're hoping, with the best of their interest, because of their ties to the community and because their families are here, that they will stay here. But there are no restrictions on any of these programs for them really to have to just stay on Guam and work for the wages that might be much lower than what they're providing in the States. So I'm not really sure I understand this line of argument. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you for the discussion. We were looking for an amendment or a deletion. The next item on the agenda is the appropriation to the college apprenticeship program. And this is, been discussed earlier, increases the appropriation level for the apprenticeship program from the $800,000 requested by the college to the 2.45, which is available to them, it also, once having completed the funding for the apprenticeship programs, allows the college then to use the remaining balance in this for other programs that are approved by the board and the administration. So this is where we actually give additional money to the college. So, and of course, section 2 of this is the reports that are required once again from the college with regards to the programs that have been funded and amounts provided by this. Senator Uggan?
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, just a couple of comments. I guess as it applies to Guam Community College and in totality this particular section. First and foremost, I think we've seen a tremendous increase in student enrollment for this upcoming school year. So I think that's accolades and certainly kudos to the administration at Guam Community College, because they're creating ways to entice our people to be educated at that community college. So I extend my kudos to that. But, you know, Mr. Speaker, there was a particular legislation that was passed recently about declaration of conflict of interest, and I just want to say that I am in full support of this appropriation measure to GCC, knowing and understanding full well that 2 of my children have decided to move in that particular direction to be educated in that institution, so at least during the interim. So I wanted to make sure that that notation is noted for the record that, yes, I do support this, and in light of direct beneficial education for my kids. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Uggan. All right. We are now then concluded the discussion on the Guam Community College. Chapter 2, Part 6. Oh, I'm sorry. Speaker Wampat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask you, because I am preparing an amendment, and it really dovetailed every discussion in terms of all these different types of programs that we fund. And I know that there's the quarterly reports, and that's just based on expenditures, not necessarily whether, you know, the monies that we're giving, they're actually producing, you know, these students who originally the monies were provided for. So I want to ask you whether this could be either an amendment that could be an administrative provisions maybe for certain ones in terms of certain programs that we say specifically this is your mission, this is what you're supposed to be using your monies for, and these are the number of students who've completed the program or who you've serviced who have actually then the end result was that they have accomplished what it is that they've set out to do. And so we're just not throwing money year after year and never seeing any results. And that's the kind of complaints that, you know, I've been hearing, that we just throw money at departments and agencies and we're not seeing the results. So I'm seeking, of course, your guidance in a sense to let me know where then I can place this amendment, whether it's administrative provisions or should this be an amendment that would fall right on every, at the end of every department agency where you have the reports.
Okay. If I may just respond, and for example, in the GCC reporting requirements, it says the reports shall include but are not limited to number of participants, the amounts expended from the appropriation, by object classification, a description of each program, the academic courses offered, and the requirements for participation. Is that may be where you want to add any additional information? Would that be?
Well, see, it says the number of participants, but it's not so much the numbers, it's the end result.
Okay.
How many of them actually do get placed in or go into that particular profession that the monies are there to train them? Like how many of these students who were in these culinary programs are actually now at the college, at some of our restaurants or hotels?
Okay.
How many of our students in the manpower, the apprenticeship program are actually now, then with, companies, that type of thing. And I don't know whether that should be a general
I think, yes.
separate amendment maybe on
Yeah,
administrative
maybe
provisions.
I would say that, my suggestion would be, of course, that We do that as a general amendment in the administrative provisions.
Okay.
Reference all reports required, and then say, any. These are the additional information required for the on those reports that provide funding for students and so forth.
Because
so
it would make
we
sense
could-
when we talk about
Yeah.
performance type budgeting, and
Right.
and yet we're not seeing any of those kind of reports coming in.
Okay.
Thank you
Okay,
very
so
much.
I think that would be appropriate
Okay.
as a general amendment that we could then incorporate technically to this. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
One other question. When I was up talking to legal counsel, I had missed it when you came down to D, which is the apprenticeship program, and where I know you've increased the manpower development from 826 to now 2.4 million.
Right.
And of course, we're very happy with that. We did last year when and I'm not sure whether I was trying to see whether it's here, but we had a priority in terms of how the manpower development
Right.
funds were to be used for.
That remains.
That remains. Okay,
That
that's what I
remains.
wanted to ask.
Yes, and then any residual after funding those priorities
Can go to
would be
other
allowed to be
administrative-
reprogrammed by the college and the board.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Senator Barnes?
Sidus Masi, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, just before we leave the Guam Community College component, I did have a brief conversation with President Okada, and she shares with me that per her discussion with Barry Mead, who is the department chairperson for the Tourism Hospitality Department, the number of students that have been placed in the community is about 20%, and she continues to say that they are continuing their efforts to increase the numbers of apprentices with the collaboration with the Guam Hotel Restaurant Association in our hotels on Guam and other factors. But based on that, she's also mentioned to me that the numbers for the enrollment for these programs have maxed out each time and continuing to grow. And if there was any further information that was needed, if you need it in writing, just to let her know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now on Chapter 2, Part 6.
Mr. Chair, I had a comment on that as well, or a question.
Yes.
Along the lines of what the good speaker brought up, is coming up with performance-based numbers realistically on this. And the information we just came up with is in order for us to make good decisions on how well a program is moving forward and how well a program is actually doing what we want it to do at the legislature, I think we need to have good numbers, and I just want to make sure I understand what you said, that you think it'd be better to come up with a good general provision in the administrative provisions of this budget bill.
That's correct, and Senator Wampat is preparing that.
I'll work with the speaker on
Or
that. Thank you very much.
Speaker Wampat, I apologize. Senator Tenorio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. Mr. Chair, my only question on this section is, in previous sections you've indicated that the Governor's Transfer Authority did or did not apply. It's kind of silent on the Guam Community College. So is there another umbrella provision later on in the bill that deals with this particular area, or?
Yes. there is.
Okay. How does it operate then with this Guam Community College appropriation and scholarships?
I'll have to take a look at that provision, Senator Tenorio, but the intent was that the Governor's Transfer Authority does not extend to the Guam Community College budget.
All right. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Chapter 2, Part 6. Section 1 is purchasing in the economics of scale, and this is requiring the departments and agencies to collaborate so that they can reduce costs by purchasing service, supplies, and materials to realize savings based upon bulk purchasing, basically. Section 2, local funds reimbursement. These are the miscellaneous education provisions. Senator Barnes on Section 2.
Well, in Section 1, just a general comment, Mr. Chair, if I may, as I don't know if you remember that
Yes.
in the 27th Guam Legislature, we had the opportunity to introduce this legislation and look at cost-cutting measures and working with our different agencies to purchase items that are needed in the same and the different agencies, but with the same item, and that working through bulk purchasing, and I'm just very elated to see that this has come to full fruition and that it is going to be a part of this budget, and that the agencies will it'll bring the awareness out for them to comply and work with this provision of law. So I just want to extend my appreciation for making sure that this was inclusive. Sidus Masi.
Thank you very much, Senator Muñoz Barnes, and I was certainly thinking about you when we put this in. Thank you. Local funds reimbursement. This is a provision that would prohibit the supplanting of costs in the different departments and agencies unless by local expenditures when there are federal grants, unless it's required that we front the cost and then get reimbursed later. So that's a normal administrative provision and miscellaneous provision that's been in other budgets. Section 3 is continuing appropriations. Once again, the appropriations made to the scholarship programs and the student financial assistance programs will continue and not lapse, and will continue to be available for the program past the fiscal year. We are,
Mr. Chair,
Senator Rector.
on continuing appropriations, forgive me my ignorance on this, but I want to make sure that this allows them to use current year appropriations to pay past due obligations. Would this provision allow that, or do I need to make an amendment as such?
My understanding is this would not allow them to, this doesn't specifically allow them to pay for past due obligations from current. So it doesn't allow them to pay for 2008, for example, or 2009. It allows them to continue to spend the money past the fiscal year to continue to meet the obligations that are current. They're not past due obligations. Past due obligations are those that are delivered and received and not paid for. And then you would use the next year's budget to pay for that. This is not the same provision.
So this doesn't do this. And
right.
So therefore, my next question is, would this be the appropriate place to put that amendment in?
If you want to refer specifically to this, I would say it is. However, I want to assure you that with regards to past due obligations, we have a general provision in the administrative provisions. There's that 2% set aside, for example, that is for deficit reduction that we have deducted from the general revenues of about 13, and that past due obligations will be allowed to be paid out of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We are now on Chapter 3. Part 1, or Chapter 3, is the health, and these are appropriations to the different areas. Part 1 is the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. This is the section that provides payment to subsidy to the Guam Memorial Hospital for the pharmaceutical fund to allow them to purchase medicine, basically, for the hospital. The amount derived here is based upon statute. There was a statute that required that 0.0619 of the revenues, the general fund revenues, 0.0619 of the gross receipts tax revenue will be used as a subsidy to that. So the amount is derived by taking the revenue projection on GRT, multiplying it by 0.0619, and that is the amount that gets fixed into this. Senator Uggan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just general information, if I may, Mr. Chair, for the information of the body, for fiscal year 09, this figure translated to approximately $12.1 million for fiscal year, for this particular fiscal year. And these proceeds will be utilized to offset MIP obligations that are coming out of public health. But also, for the information of the body again, the Compact Impact Funds, which has been requested by GMH officials to the Chief Executive for the upcoming fiscal year, continues to remain at a level of $3.5 million.
That is correct. So
yes.
there's an additional $3.5 million that the governor has earmarked under the federal grants to the hospital. Yes.
And then also the recent bond deficit reduction proposal
That's correct.
allocates $11 million, which would pay off an obligation for GMH and go directly to the retirement fund to pay off the retirement fund obligation, and then an additional $10 million or approximately $10 million for CIP projects. So if you look at GMH in totality going into fiscal year 10 and some of the proceeds that are being applied over the course of the last couple of months, I think it says that, in fact, GMH is receiving some significant resources to take care not only of past obligations and commitments to the retirement fund, but also to address some of their CIP needs and their operations. And I just want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for continuing this effort and ensuring that the 12.8 is allocated.
Yes. In addition to that, the hospital also received from the bond proceeds for the COLA and the income tax refunds. They realized from offsets that the government, the revenue tax took against individuals that were paid these amounts that were owing, and I think it was almost $1 million, maybe a little bit more, in terms of offsets from those bond payments to the to the Guam Memorial Hospital. So they actually have received quite a substantial amount of injection from both action by this body and operation of law in regards to this. Senator Cruz.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for recognizing me. Just on GMH, how does this compare to previous years?
Pardon?
How does this compare to previous years? I understand that Chairman Uggan says that it's 12.1 for this year, but on previous years, I thought it was a higher amount. I thought at one point we had 16.
No, 13 last year. I think it was at. Yes. Yeah, FY 2009 it was 12,140,525.
But I mean, in like 07 or 0.
That it was based on the GRT. It's that formula. It's driven by a formula based on the GRT revenues.
And was that sufficient for their operation to meet their needs? I know that they have this accreditation endeavor coming up, and I'm just wondering whether or not that is sufficient for their operation. I know in the past we've given them separate sums of money,
right?
And this 12 million somehow just doesn't seem like it's as large as I remember in the past. It
is larger than the subsidy under this category.
Yeah.
So in that respect, for example, in the past, their bond proceeds of $10 million. So that it wasn't part of this appropriation category, but they got 10. Just like this year in the bond proceeds, they got that additional amount and so forth.
Okay, so there is someplace else where they might be getting some money because I'm just
yes.
Because I thought it's something in the back of my mind. It was like 28 was the total amount of subsidy that the hospital gets from different places.
No, not that I recall. Not that I recall.
Yeah.
Senator Calvo.
Yeah, in previous years, again, there are certain other pharmaceuticals fund, percent of GRT, but then there are bond proceeds, debt service savings. Right. So there have been differing sources. I do want to note on the earlier statements made about how this figure was arrived at, and I guess that was a little bit of my confusion on regards to the revenue side. You have that core tech, and that's you. I think part of this has to do, and Chris, just correct me if I'm wrong. The core tech that you're netting out that tax. The core tech line item, isn't it?
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's where the issue is, I'm not here to criticize it. It's just that there's certain ways to calculate revenues, and you do it usually through population. This one is a specific company or a specific item, and you just got that number and taken it out. So, that's a little bit like apples and oranges type of thing for me. But I think that's the reason why I think you have that a little bit of a difference in the reduction on the pharmaceuticals fund. Correct?
Yes, based upon the adopted GRT revenue. And so when you net out that, it's based on the collections of the GRT. So
And if the core tech was still there, then it would have been 13, there's where the, a little bit over 13 million bucks.
it'll be 4% of the 4.4
Yeah.
million. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Senator Cowell. Okay, so that's the amount. The Chapter 3, Part 2 is the Department of Public Health and Social Services. This sets out the appropriation level for the department. The grand total is about is 75,074,423, set out in the different object categories. The summary of the base operation funding source is the general fund contributes 47,897,406. Federal matching grant and aids total 21,062,098. These are mostly your MIP Medicaid. And then the special funds generate 6,114,919 for your total appropriation level or total resource level at the department at 75,074,423. Senator Cruz and then Senator Elgin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And you're not the only one that has suffered me on this one. The former chairman has suffered me on this one, on the issue of how much is given to MIP and
Yes.
Medicaid.
Right.
Again, I see that the combined total for this year is only 28 or 29 million.
Mm-hmm.
And unless my memory is really slipping, in previous years we've run as high as 32 or 33 million in Medicaid and MIP. I've had, what's her name up there? She owes me dinner at Maxime's in Paris because I have bet her every single time that we've had a hearing that there isn't sufficient amount of money that they've asked for MIP and Medicaid. Is this amount the amount that they've asked for? Is this amount the amount that is actually needed to run those two programs?
Thank you very much. We had a fairly extensive discussion with public health on this, and we are concerned about the same manner. One of the changes that was made was that the pharmaceutical fund, with the recommendation of the auditors, requested that that be recognized as revenue. When they did that, we allowed the payments to GMH under the pharmaceutical fund to be credited against the payment for Medicaid and MIP share at the hospital. So that has allowed the public health to use some of that payment to match to use for the federal matching fund for Medicaid, which means now we have less money that has to come out of the MIP. And so based upon those transactions, the MIP is at 15, the Medicaid is at 13. That's the matching portion. There's additional money on the Medicaid then that comes from feds. 50, I think it's 50-50. Yeah, 50-50 for Medicaid, so that brings you $26 million total. We used to have to take cash out of MIP to match that, to subsidize that. Now we don't because of the application of credit at the hospital of the pharmaceutical fund. And based upon those transactions, your dinner may only be in New York and not Paris.
Well, no, this was for previous years.
Yes,
and
I
there's
know.
several of them that they owe me because every year I've said I wanted to choose the restaurant they take me to, and they've always underestimated the amount that they
I know,
that
so
they
I think
need.
maybe the underestimation would only get you to New York.
Okay, well,
is what I'm
anyway,
saying. But
I figure I'll never get that dinner anyway.
Yeah.
But Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
my concern is in the budget that we passed for this fiscal year, we allowed for prior payment of prior year obligations.
That's correct.
And straight off the top, they took almost 14, or no, it was 8 from a previous year, from 08.
Yes.
how short are we currently? And I haven't been going to the funeral, so I haven't been told how many people are out there dying because they're not getting their medications. But I'm just wondering, are we at that point again where we're owing all the vendors and our people aren't being taken care of? Because it's usually in August. Well, actually, last year was as early as May that we ran out of money.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me have Chris respond to that, because not only, of course, is he helping us on this, but some of his background in terms of healthcare and the financing. But we are fairly current. We are pretty current with MIP and Medicaid now, in terms of our providers and vendors, and that has to do with, again, freeing up the cash on the appropriation side with the credit at the hospital on the application of the pharmaceutical fund payments. But I'll have Chris explain a little bit of exactly what your concern was with regards to that $8 million rollover, I guess, in what we would call IBNR in the insurance language. But Chris?
Sure. At the start of each fiscal year, there's always going to be kind of a run out from the previous year, and it's what's called incurred but not received claims. So claims come in, and they come in at a slower rate than when the services are provided. So you're always going to have a spillover of a certain portion of your costs rolling into the next fiscal year. Now, a lot of that, I think, was exacerbated when we talked with public health by the $1 million a week that was withheld earlier in the year. So to avoid a cash flow crisis, I think basically everybody was getting less money, and that's why it ballooned to almost $8 million at that point.
No, this was before the $1 million that the federal judge was taking. This has been a systemic problem for as long as I've been a member of this legislature. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And the problem that I'm having with this area is that if I was to have Senator Tina call her friends up at St. Dominic's, I know that in March we owed them $800,000.
Mm-hmm.
Are we current with St. Dominic's? Because that's always been that problem. St. Dominic's was running $800,000. Catholic Social Services, as late as last week, I know Catholic Social Services has been always carrying almost $1 million in accounts receivable from the government.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because we're not paying either out of MIP or out of DISID, but these nonprofits are having to take line of credits to make their payroll or even to pay their power bill. And it's unconscionable. We ask them to do all these services, and yet we're not paying them. And I'm just wondering, are we providing enough money in this budget, because it hasn't been in the previous years? And my recollection has been 32 or more.
In our review of this budget, in our review of the budget request for MIP and Medicaid program, I am confident, and that for the upcoming fiscal year, with these revenue appropriation levels, that we will adequately fund the requirements of these two programs for the next fiscal year. We're still trying to, on this fiscal year, because of the use of the pharmaceutical fund to credit against payments by MIP required at GMH, we have been able to free up some of the money to continue to make payments to past due bills. I'm checking right now specifically with regards to St. Dominic's, whether that bill has been paid. But in my conversation with the program management staff at Public Health, that these appropriation levels combined with the pharmaceutical fund credit at the hospital will adequately fund these two programs in the FY 2010. Yeah. In addition to that, for the upcoming fiscal year, there is actually additional ARA funding that is going to be available for these two programs, for the Medicaid program mostly. So for the next fiscal year, I'm very confident that these two appropriation levels are very sufficient. The past due bills, from what I have been told, because of the application of that payment, of the appropriation at GMH for credits against MIP and Medicaid, that has freed up some of the cash at the MIP appropriation, and they're able to make additional payments to the vendors in the reconciliation of those past due bills. I'm not sure at what level they're at for this fiscal year on this.
Okay, then you'll take me to dinner at Maxine's
I will
in Paris?
take you to dinner in New York, not Paris. Yes. Thank you very much. Senator Ogden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I guess this is an issue, and I'd like to bring it up because our good colleague from GIGO had highlighted it regarding the miscellaneous identification. Apparently, there's a $47.2 million figure that's allocated placed under the identification of miscellaneous, and we know and understand that, at least from my perspective, I know and understand that those are program funds. Those are program benefits funds allocated to the respective programs within public health. So I don't know,
Yes.
on page 31,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, number 5, so I think that perhaps a re-identification of that, other than miscellaneous. I know that's how they presented it. That's how they have presented it in the past in terms of miscellaneous funding. But $47 million under just a miscellaneous without a clarification that those are really program benefits.
Correct.
That are administered out of public health, then it really gives I guess, just from a general perspective,
Yes.
Brings up a big question. But Mr. Chair, I think that there needs to be that direct recognition also that this budget provides, the Chief Executive had requested a figure in the amount of 53.5, of which this budget provides an outright allocation of 56.5. So we're talking about an additional allocation just for public health in support of not only their operations, but also in support of many of the activities taking place there. And of course, with the ongoing issue with regards to the swine flu, we're very hopeful that they would utilize some of these funds at the inception of the fiscal year so that, in fact, they can increase all of their ongoing efforts to try to mitigate that. Because in October, it's anticipated that Guam, as well as the rest of the nation, will be able to get that actual vaccine for the swine flu. But until such time, then obviously all the education and prevention and mitigation efforts have to be increased. On that note, if I may, Mr. Chair, just share with our colleagues and the community that yes, in fact, public health officials have pursued federal grants. They were successful in acquiring $146,000, of which they received 50% of that on August 1st, and they will be receiving the remaining balance of those federal funds in September, early September. In addition to that, they have put in another application for perhaps the same amount, if not more, so that they anticipate receiving those additional revenues in the latter part of September and going into October. So in terms of the resources that are readily available, or that will be readily available in the course of the next month and a half, as it applies to the H1N1 situation, I think that public health does have some federal funds that they've been able to aggressively pursue, and then in conjunction with some of their ongoing budgetary allocations for this fiscal year, hopefully that will be able to get them through the entire situation going to the next FY. But I wanted to highlight that, Mr. Chair, that your committee has identified additional resources for public health for the purpose of providing additional support to this agency. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, and just as a note, we provided an additional increase the medicines for the community health centers. We provided them, I think, we basically doubled it from $234,000 that was requested by the governor. We doubled the for medicines at the community health centers. They've had some expansions, so we doubled that to about 520. We funded the Division of Senior Citizens in the budget that was submitted by the administration. And again, I just wanted to say that, you know, the budget submitted by the administration was the lower revenue figures, so they had to make some cuts somewhere. And what we've done is we've restored about about $3 million of cuts to senior citizen programs in order to meet the cap. With the additional revenue that we had estimated, we restored about $3 million for programs at the Division of Senior Citizens. In addition to that, of course, we also funded positions at the Division of Public Health, which is the public health clinics, with the additional doctors that they've recruited, nurse practitioners. We've included a couple of nurses, a program coordinator, a physician specialist, 2 physician specialists, social worker, a social service supervisor, and in the Division of Public Welfare, we included a health benefits specialist in that. So in addition to that, in the Bureau of the Food Stamp Program, Bureau of Security, Health, Public Welfare, in that, yeah, in that sector also, the federal grants that, because of the suspension that they had at one time and withholding of some of the administrative component of the program funds, there was some withholding of that or threatened to be withheld, and they had to make some adjustments. They had a lapse of about $4 million that they were not able to spend in those program funds. They've made their corrections, they've been restored, and so that $4 million has been authorized to be carried over into this fiscal year for those program funds. So that increases this fiscal year, or in the FY 2010 fiscal year for those program funds, of about $4 million that they're able to then implement for the enhanced benefits, as well as the financial management system that they're trying to put in place and support for those programs. So these are the positive changes that are occurring, not only as an action of this budget, but also as an action of some of the improvements that they're making in public health. So, Senator Tenorio.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that. One of the issues that we have at Guam Memorial Hospital is the relative inability for public health centers to be able to receive and to act on many of the things that ail our community. And by enhancing those public programs in our community centers, we are thereby hopefully going to alleviate some of the strain that's being placed in the emergency room. And also, in doing so, also reduce the incidence of people waiting for those hospital beds and rooms to be available for those who truly need them. And also, I think, better facilitate the true delivery of public health services. The reference that my good colleague from Jonia had made with regards to the miscellaneous section of the public health appropriation was, it was a $47 million item under object classification 290, which we all understand every agency is required to place in one category or another their object classification, and the miscellaneous, because there's so many programs that don't fall into the other areas and things that are conducted by the Department of Public Health that don't fall in the other areas, they have to be placed in there. So there's a misconception. We're not buying $47 million worth of pencils and paper clips. It's $47 million in programs, but I think for the betterment and the interest of the community at large that don't understand that, that needs to be emphasized, and I'm glad that the good chair of health had brought that up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Tenorio. Any other discussions? Senator Cabo.
Again, we're at page 31. On special funds, you have $6,114,919, and maybe I may be misreading this, or there may be another fund source. Healthy Futures Fund and Environmental Health Fund; those are part of special funds, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Those are the appropriations from those funds.
I'm doing my addition there, and I'm adding $6,647,447, and I'm wondering, I see that number. Is there something there that, and I'm not too sure whether it's the special fund calculation, is at 6.1, or maybe it's something at the Healthy Futures Environmental Health Fund that may need a correction, but
Yes.
is there a reconciliation issue here?
I think we may have just,
5,973,729 and 673,718 should equal 6,647,447.
yeah. We're going to have to, we'll reconcile that. I think
Oh.
we may have juxtaposed
Some-
those numbers, a
Okay.
couple of the numbers. But those are the two sources of funds.
Those are the two,
under
right?
special funds, yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much for pointing that out, Senator. Okay, any other comments? All right, we are now then on the environmental health fund, we have those totals. Agency expenses, again, we have put in a new program, as you'll see in the upcoming appropriations, of a utility bank and a health bank, and that's just taking those cost centers and putting them into these for better tracking and better flexibility into these categories. The public assistance program, we went through the public assistance program. The sum of $2 million is appropriated for the base operation authorized as the local match for the federal matching grant and aids for the department, and that's for FY 2010. The matching federal fund that will come from that local appropriation will be $5,721,862. And as we discussed earlier, the MIP program, Medically Indigent Program, is a fully locally funded program of $15,822,907. And part of the, this is the appropriation to the department. They are able to augment this with offsets at GMH from that pharmaceutical fund. The Medicaid program is a 50-50 match, and the local match required or requested is $13,950,750, and the federal funds, so that total cost of that program is $27 million. The medicines for the community's health centers, as we indicated, they have some expansion there, as noted by some of my colleagues. They've actually not only expanded the facility, they've expanded staff, and they've expanded hours. And so that has resulted in more access to that service, and we requested and doubled the appropriation level for the medicines there. This actually goes very much even further than just that additional dollar amount. Ms. Linda DeNorsi was able to enter into a program that allows her to buy the medicines now at a greatly reduced cost through the establishment of a line of credit based upon the appropriation level, and buying then through the jobber, you might want to say, or through that pharmaceutical warehouse that she's able to buy. She's now able to reduce the medicines cost. I think it's something like 50%. So we're actually almost doubling the doubling in terms of how much medicine we can buy because of the additional money and that discount that she was able to implement. The Enhanced Allotment Program, this is a fund for the Medicare Part D that we actually have to pay for some of our enrollees in the Medicare, in the Medicaid program, I'm sorry. And this is a matching federal grant that we get. And so this allows us to access additional Medicaid payments for Part D program that is not covered under the regular Medicaid program. And here again, we carry forward the appropriations made from the general fund and special funds to the Department of Public Health so that they're able to continue to use this area and the appropriations for these incurred but not received claims, for example. They're not really prior year obligations and so forth. Okay. Yeah. All right. So that is the appropriation level for the Department of Public Health. There is a I want to request and ask the members of the body. There is a what do you call it? An address, the presidential lecture at the University of Guam at 11 o'clock, I believe, by the chairman of the Committee on Natural Resources, and I wish to attend that, and so I am going to ask for a member of the body to make a recess until 2. Okay? All right. Motion to recess until 2. Si Diyos masi. Good afternoon. The Committee of the Whole on the Committee on Appropriations is back in session. Before we broke, we had finished and concluded discussion at the Department of Public Health. The next department up is in Chapter 3, Part 3, the Department of Mental Health. This is a department that, of course, we all know is faced with many challenges because of the fact that we are under an amended court order, consent decree, with regards to the services that are being provided and the expertise and staff that's needed there. So we work with the director of the department, and we're able to allocate increases in their budget to resolve some of the issues that they have. One of the biggest issues, of course, is recruitment of staff, and I do want to note that the Department of Mental Health has been able to recruit, I believe, about 3 new psychiatrists or 4 new psychiatrists in the last probably 6 months. The budget that you have, once again, sets it up into object class categories. I do want to point out, for example, that the biggest increases or the significant increases that we gave this department to meet the amended consent decree. In the contractual services last year, this department was budgeted at $3,121,000, and this year we're increasing that to $4,634,000. That's going to resolve around some of the group home services, etc. The supplies and material will increase from $394,000 last year to $1.9 million this year. And in the miscellaneous category, that will increase from $14,653 to $311,070.05. And I wanted to note also in the summary of the base operations, under the federal matching grant and aid, there's an error there. The amount of federal matching grant and aid that the department will receive is $267,298. So it's not the 72 that's listed there. And this number 267,298 is correctly reflected in the inventory of federal matching grants and aids on page 5 of the total revenue. It was just an error there when we uploaded that data field onto this table when we were uploading all the new additional appropriation levels when we're finalizing the bill. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is once again...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just for formalities and before you proceed any further, will you then entertain a motion that this number be adjusted upward?
Yes.
Okay, so I so move, and I'll get that to the clerk in writing.
All right. Thank you very much.
Follow your lead, Mr. Chairman. Thank
you. There is an amendment by Senator Espicio to correct and adjust the $72,000 in the page 14, line 35, federal matching grant and aid, and that number will read $267,298. There's no objections on that amendment. Thank you. So we'll now entertain any comments or questions on this bill. The chair, of course, Senator Uggan, will recognize you, and then Senator Tiger.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank your committee for giving serious consideration to the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. I think that something that you recognize is that there's right now there's a court injunction that has to be complied with. The director was very successful in recruiting 4 professionals, like you alluded to a little earlier, psychiatrists, and he continues to go out aggressively to try to recruit additional personnel within the professional category, specifically to provide the services directly to our people in this community. Also, just yesterday morning, they had a ribbon cutting ceremony for a children inpatient unit. And I want to credit him and his leadership, Dr. Shimizu, the acting or the director at the moment, for all of his efforts in terms of realizing the opening of that children inpatient units, because when he initially came in January, unfortunately there was no such service or no such unit or space available for children to be serviced. What he did in January, February was basically had a storage area cleared out, and that was the interim children's inpatient unit servicing area. And now that they've moved into a much more accommodating location, I think that's a direct reflection of all of his efforts over the course of the last 7 months. One thing that kind of concerns me, Mr. Chairman, is certainly not the budget aspect, but having had the services and received the services of Dr./Senator Shimizu over the course of the last 7 months. Unfortunately, there has not been any mutually agreed upon mechanism where in fact he, as the director of the department, would be compensated. And I think that that's a serious concern as we see some of the things that he has been able to accomplish in terms of carrying this agency to where it's at today. And that's a direct reflection of his leadership. It's a direct reflection of the deputy director who's assisting him, and of course all of his staff members who are there. But Mr. Speaker, I'd like to just bring that up as an issue that perhaps may be addressed at a latter part of this budget to allow for a little bit of flexibility. So in fact, there may be consideration to provide the chief executive a little bit more flexibility to at least bring this individual or any other individual who has the professional credentials to serve in either this capacity or in the capacity of other agencies that we really require professional credentials, certification credentials, such as GMH is another one that immediately comes to mind. So Mr. Speaker, I'd like to just share that as an issue of concern, and I certainly hope that we can get the support of, or I can get the support of yourself and our colleagues to see if we can ultimately address that, not to address a name-specific person, but the position, and allowing for a professional to come in a different, from a different angle rather than the regular employment status, where in fact they may have to forego other benefits that they're presently receiving. So I just wanted to share that, and thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for working in conjunction with the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse and Senator Shimizu, because based on the comparative analysis of what the chief executive had originally requested in the budget of $10.2 million, you were able to work not only with the executive branch but within your committee to identify the additional $4.5 million to give to this department that is ailing by virtue of where it's at right now through the judicial process, the court process with the district court. And I certainly hope that with these additional resources that either Senator Shimizu or whoever may be filling that position for the next 1.5 years or 2 years and beyond, that they would utilize these resources to be able to address these court issues and improve the services to our people by that agency. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Uggan. Before I recognize Senator Titagui, I also wanted to point out to our members here that, of course, we've all been very concerned about the Ifamagonta program. There was an expiration of the Ifamagonta program federal funding in this fiscal year, and that we had to depend on local funding for that program. We have, in this budget, recognized the need to continue to fund that program because of the vital services it provides. And so we have fully funded the Ifamagonta program at its current level with the federal grants that's available. In addition to that, we have added a whole new team of a psychiatric social worker, and caseworker, wraparound coordinator, a brand new team because there's been some waiting lists in that program. So when you look at and that budget is now located under the Child Adolescent Services Division, and so that budget increase from FY09 of $620,000 to $2.8 million, and that accounts for that Ifamagonta program that's at its current level, plus an additional, I think it's about a $200,000 increase for that new care team, wraparound care team. So I want to thank all of my colleagues for stressing to the committee the importance of that program. I know all of you are supportive of it, and certainly the individuals out there that work in this program, as well as the director, is very appreciative of all of your efforts and what we've been able to do in this. So thank you. Senator Taitigui.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I just wanted to make sure that the math is correct after you've changed the 290, that now it reflects 13,339,461 instead of, so,
Right.
you know, I know that was changed, but I also like to commend you for putting so much effort in this department, this agency. We don't want to see this agency go into receivership, and I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chair, for taking care of the needs of this department.
Thank you very much, Sister Sumasi. Any other discussion on the Section 1 of the bill? Senator Rector.
Just a little clarification, if I might, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I noticed there's no money budgeted for power and water.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure there's
The
some
power and
reasonable.
It's on the next page. We've separated out, again, if you notice the way it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So that goes to that utility bank. Okay?
Fantastic.
So,
I knew there was some logical reason. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And it's the same for the increments. The increments used to be built into the salary level, making it all automatic. Now you'll see that the increments really are supposed to be for performance of the individuals in those positions, and that evaluations have to be performed on these individuals, guidance have to be given, et cetera, in order to earn that increment. And so we have separated that out, and so we know it's not automatic. You have to go through the process of being evaluated, given guidance, counseled, and all that. And that's kind of like one of our first steps towards performance management. We do that when working that with the staff. So you'll see that that's just the way we've broken that out also. So it's a separate from automatic salaries. So, Senator Cruz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In this section and in the last section, I'm wondering, with the outstanding balances, accounts payables that this department especially,
Yes.
and the other department has, and
You're talking about number 3, right? The detoxification program?
No, not the
okay.
detoxification.
Okay.
There's no provision in this entire section for authorization to pay prior year obligations. In the event that we finish the fiscal year and they still have a million outstanding to vendors,
Right.
will they have authorization to pay prior year obligations with this, or what is there?
One of the provisions and one of the elements of the budget is that reservation of that 2% for deficit reduction. So if we end the year with obligations from the fiscal year 2010, when we go into there, when we close fiscal year 2010, that 2% deficit reduction line item reservation is dedicated to paying prior year obligation, or the deficit, which is what that would transfer to. So it goes from a current year liability to a prior year liability, which gets booked in the deficit. And that 2% reservation includes the payment of vendors for prior year, for the deficit and prior year obligations.
So the vendors are going to have to carry the accounts payable for 12 more months? See, if my memory serves me right, in the current fiscal year budget, we provided for authorization for prior year obligations. So on October the 2nd,
Yes.
if there were outstanding obligations from 08, they were able to use 09 money to pay 08, which then put them in a deficit.
Yes.
but at least it got them to be almost current on October the 3rd, as opposed to waiting a whole year to try to wait to see whether or not the 2% can be utilized to make these payments. These vendors are carrying already almost a year's worth of accounts payable, and I really do think that it's a disservice, especially to the nonprofits, to tell them hold off and on September the 30th of 2010, we'll see how much is still, you're still owed for 08, for 09, and we'll pay you.
No, I'm sorry. The 2% is available this year, beginning when the revenues are collected and allocated. We allocate a portion for the operating expense. We allocate the portion for the income tax refunds. We allocate the 2% reserve beginning this fiscal year. So that 2% reserve is available for prior year obligations. So that 2% reserve will be available for the 2009 obligations. The closeout of fiscal year 2009 becomes part of the deficit, and so that reservation of the 2% is ongoing in terms of allowing that reservation to be used for prior years. So you don't have to wait for the close of fiscal year. You have to wait for the close of fiscal year 2010 for 2010 obligations to be paid. But at the beginning of 2010 fiscal year, and you collected and you put $100,000 or $1 million in that provision, then your 2009 obligations are available to be charged and paid for against that provision immediately. It's only the 2010 that has to wait to become a prior year.
Where is that in this?
It's in the 3% reserve. It's in.
I see the 2% reserve on page 3, but the explanation on that, is there some Finno English someplace that I can point to someone and say it's?
Wait. Yeah.
You can wait for some time in October or November, but you don't need to wait until next September.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. Hold on, I'll find it for you. It's no. Let me. Yeah. Where? What page?
I see on page 153 the prior year appropriations report, but I don't see anything to pay for anything.
No, it's on page 139. Section 5, 139, deficit reduction. All unpaid prior year obligations, including obligations for tax refunds, vendor payables, back pay for employees, or other obligations resulting from judgments or awards approved prior to FY 2010 by any regulatory body, court, or administrative authority, which remain unpaid at the beginning of FY 2010, unless otherwise authorized, shall be paid from the unappropriated general fund reserves collected in excess of appropriations and reserved for deficit reduction pursuant to Section 22436, Article 4, Chapter 22 of Title 5, Guam Code Annotated. And that's that 2% reserve.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Senator Rector.
If I could follow up on that a little bit, there's this language kind of, maybe you can clarify this a little bit for me, where it says, shall be paid from the unappropriated general fund revenues collected in excess of appropriations. Now, the way I understood it, that the government of Guam collects $1, 2 cents of that dollar automatically goes into the deficit reduction fund. It doesn't matter what's happening with the other 98 cents. It doesn't matter what's been paid or what happens been paid. That 2 cents comes right off the top and goes into this fund.
Correct.
So it's not what's collected in excess of appropriations.
Yes, it is, because our appropriations total $540 million.
So then that means we have to wait until we've collected 540 million and then we start pulling 2% after that?
No, because we took off the top from the 655 with the set aside for that. So it's what's in excess of what we appropriate. So we can't, in other words, we can't take the line item appropriations and exceed those line items. So we can't, if we have line item of an appropriation of $1 million for salaries in one department, we can't go above that 1 million. So it's in excess of those.
No, I understand that. It just, to me, the way this is written, revenues collected in excess of appropriation, it seems to refer to me that you can't collect the revenues until after you've exceeded the amount needed for appropriations.
That's fine. We could get a legal opinion on that. I don't interpret it that way.
Okay.
The other thing, of course, is that, remember, our budget has, the way we set it aside with the provision for refunds, have a total available for appropriation of 553, and we're only appropriating 540 because of the reservation for that 13 million under 2%.
Okay, I appreciate your patience with me on this. You are the expert. I just want to make sure I understand. And then where in this, like, because I understand what you're saying, like we collect $1, 2 cents of that dollar goes into this deficit reduction fund. Where does it say that in this budget bill, that that's how the collections are going to go?
It's in the revenue section where we say we're going to collect the 600. We take out at the top the refunds, then we take out, then we come to the available appropriation, then we take the 2%.
Right.
And that takes us down to 545.
You're talking about on page 2.
Yeah, and yes, that's where we reflect what that number is going to be. It's in the statute that you read there at the end, that chapter. That's where. Okay.
So section 22-436, Article 4, Chapter 22 of Title 5
correct.
is where it's going to explain that.
That's correct. That tells you what's available to be paid and the money to be set aside to pay those.
Then I shall review that. Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome. Okay. Any other discussion on mental health? The number 3 on mental health is the detoxification and rehabilitation services. And again, this is from the general fund for outsourcing of drug and alcohol detoxification, rehabilitation, prevention services. And these are for their vendors, basically. So, no other comments on mental health? We shall now proceed to Chapter 3, Part 3, and we are with the Department of Integrated Services for Individuals with Disabilities. This is a agency that has undergone some transformation in that the group home programs that used to be funded under mental health have since been, by executive order, moved to the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. So there were 2 group home programs that were previously funded under this, and they totaled over $1 million, and that's why we see a reduction in this budget, because the staff to operate that program, as well as the funding for the contract, has been moved to mental health, and that has shown a reduction in this. So that really is, yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, both. They have 2 programs. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they're both in there. Yeah. Okay. So the budget in here increased. We wanted to give a little bit of resource also to this department, and even with the move from the group home programs and the move for that staff, we have increased the budget in this department by approximately $250,000. Now we allow them some breathing room and to meet their needs. So, any other discussion? Senator Tidegway.
Mr. Chair, just real quickly, with DISIT, have they moved from GCIC, the DNA building, have they moved out to the mental health building?
You know, I'm not sure. I don't know.
I'm still seeing the office rental space
Yes.
at 118,000 a year, and
As far as I know, they were still there, and they said that they may have planned to move there, but they requested for this amount, and not knowing the finality of it, we decided to honor that request.
okay, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We're now on Chapter 4, Unified Judiciary and the Public Defender. The judiciary, ladies and gentlemen, requested an increase in their budget, and we basically gave them approximately almost a 10% increase in their total budget request. It's not a 10% increase from their request. It's a 10% increase from their current operating budget, because they did not get a portion of their request last time. It was not released at all to them, and so they didn't have that cost in their current operating cost. But the general fund will support the unified judiciary by $22,018,124. They receive $693,000 in 07 in federal and matching grants. The Northern Satellite Court will also be okay, and so in their operating budget, they had an executive branch request for the unified judiciary of $20,168,000. The budget that you have here gives them an operating budget of $22,717 coming from the general fund and matching grant and aid. So that is about, as I mentioned, almost a 10% increase. We also funded several positions within the probation department. During the presentation, they noted the large number of cases that these probation officers handle versus what the national average is. And so we have allowed them and funded for them the, let me see here, the positions. Yeah. So in the Court Administrative Services Division, we funded vacancies in this division, 2 vacancies. In the justice area, we funded 3 vacancies. Under the judges section 4, the Northern Court received an appropriation of $748 with 9 funded positions in there. The courts and ministerial received 3 funded vacant positions. The client services receives 1. The probation receives 8 funded positions, and we added 2 new positions within the probation division of the court. And the public guardian, with the increased workload there, gets 2 positions. Child support receives funding for 5 vacant positions. The marshals receive funding for 5 vacant positions in the marshals. In child support, I'm sorry. The marshals also get 5 vacant positions that they've requested, and those are funded, plus 2 additional positions within the marshals division, and for a total of 54 FTEs in terms of funded positions as requested by this. The other one we wanted to highlight is the grants that the court applied. The court is applying for over $400,000 in federal grants. Now, part of the grants that the court is applying for would fund positions that we are funding in the general fund. And we're going to leave those funded. So what would happen is if the federal grants come through, then they can use the federal grant to fund those positions, and then they can reallocate the funding that we provided for those vacant positions for other court operations. And that will basically make up for what they've requested from what we've been given to them, inclusive of the increase that we've given to them. And of course, the court's budget is as an independent branch of government, is a lump sum budget, which is managed by their judicial council. So that is the basic changes that were made in this budget for the Northern Court. I mean, for the operations of the court. In addition to that, of course, the court handles court-appointed attorneys for indigent defense, and the request that was originally made was about $640,000. We have increased the indigent defense to $1 million. The court requested that a line item be increased. The adult and juvenile drug court gets $656,562 to continue to operate that. The visitor center, called Erica's House, continues to be funded at $140,000 per year. And of course, as I mentioned, in recognition of the court as a third co-equal branch of government, the court administration gets transfer authority for within its operations budget, but it leaves these miscellaneous appropriations for, like, court-appointed attorneys, the visitor center, and the drug court, that there's no transfer out of those appropriations. So I think we have done well for the court. They've been challenged, as you know. They had some problems this year with some releases of their allotments, and I think that with the revenue level that's been given to them, that they'll have some flexibility in the courts. Thank you very much, and of course the transfer authority. Senator Duggan, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank you very much again for being generous to the court system. I think that there's a couple of items that you really highlighted in terms of the reinforcement of the support, the funding support for the judiciary of Guam. And when you're looking at the Northern Satellite Court, obviously the facility has been identified, the location is being upgraded, and the intent is to expedite the opening of that particular facility so that they can begin servicing our people in the northern part of the island. I think that when you're also looking at the court-appointed attorneys' fees, that's an area that needed some reinforcement and additional funding to be able to continue to allow for the judges to support our people through that particular mechanism. Also, Mr. Chairman, you highlighted the need for additional personnel, not only the probation officers, but the Northern Court staff, and also the marriage counseling and some of the other case managers sections of operations within the judiciary of Guam. One thing that's we continue to tout on a regular basis, Mr. Chairman, is that in order to deal with this military buildup, obviously it may translate into increased activity at the court system just by virtue of the increased population. And that being the case, I think that the opening of the Northern Satellite Court, in conjunction with providing the additional support, funding support for the judiciary of Guam, I think is going to bode very well over the course of the next fiscal year for our people in terms of the services being provided, in terms of the ability of the judiciary of Guam to provide the justice in time to service all of our people in our community. So I thank you again for seriously considering and granting the request of the judiciary of Guam and the chief justices as well as the judges in terms of providing that additional support. One thing that I will close with this, that I think is information that is always very helpful whenever we're looking at whether the probation officers are overtasked or the marshals are overtasked or the judiciary itself is in need of additional information. There has been over the last year and the last 2 to 3 years incremental increases in the number of caseloads being entertained just by the judiciary of Guam in the individualized section. There's one portion that you mentioned, and that's the probation officers. They continue to receive incremental increases without increase in personnel. And I think that just by virtue of the budget that you have provided herein, that will provide them that additional manpower that they certainly need assistance with. And then also looking at some of the other components, I think that there's something that was also incorporated into the budget, Mr. Chair, that needs to be emphasized, that yes, the law enforcement personnel within the judiciary, it is incorporated. You have incorporated the 10% increment into this budgetary allocation. So
that is correct.
Yes.
All of the law enforcement positions that within the various departments, because law enforcement is not just GPD and so forth, but all of the law enforcement designated positions have been funded for the original 10 plus the 10 that was due to them this year.
Thank you, and I just wanted to also emphasize that. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. And perhaps there was one additional component that was requested, but I hope that based on the information you provided in terms of being able to acquire federal grants and perhaps transition some of these personnel into the federal grant programs, that the judiciary of Guam will be able to have additional flexibility so that they can go out and update their vehicle fleet, because I know that that's another area that they have expressed some concerns with, and the flexibility, and I like the use of that term co-equal branch of government,
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, in anticipation of something that may be coming down the pipe, the latter part of this particular budget considerations. But I think the transfer authority granted herein is very flexible, and I certainly look forward to increased services by the judiciary. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to clarify a couple of statements. When I said they applied for over 400,000 in federal grants, I was looking at the wrong column. That 400,000 would only be the overtime and hazardous and night differential component of their federal grant should they be awarded. The total grant application the court has, which they have been very successful in the past, is about between $6 and $10 million. So 6,941 is the inventory we have, but I understand from the courts that they have applied for other ones that we did not have on the federal inventory list of grant applications. So the 400 would only be for night differential and hazardous pay should they get their grants. The other thing I wanted to clarify is I said 54 positions. We did not fund 54. 54 was the total number of vacant positions that they asked us to fund, which is the $5.3 million of the difference between their official request and what is being budgeted. So we funded 27 of those vacancies, and that accounts for the 10% increase in their budget allocation. So yes, and that's right. And this is not inclusive of any ARA funding that may be available to the courts. The governor gets 19%? 19. The governor of the ARA funding gets $19 million, which he can allocate for public safety and general governmental operations. So the court may be able to participate in some of the allocation from that. So. Yeah. So that is the court, ladies and gentlemen. Any additional discussion? If not, Senator and Speaker Wampat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I know that this is not basically the area or the place, I suppose, but it's just I'm listening to some of the increases, and I'm happy that we're able to do all this. But I really just hope that it's not, of course, all sacrificing what I said, especially now, because I'm trying to find monies now for contractual.
Yes.
And we've done no new positions and no vacant positions, and I'm really, I really hope we will come to a closer number soon, because if we don't, then I know it's going to affect everybody else. So that's why I'm trying to look at every possible place where I need to start putting into contractual.
Well, what we're going to
for DOE.
What becomes available, Madam Speaker, as you know, is of course that we haven't finished with the DOE portion, and we know that we've been very generous to the courts, and when we go back to the education and we find that we may need to find more, then we know who we've given the most to, or a lot, who we've given a lot to.
Okay, because I just need to caution, I know you didn't say this earlier in terms of what one of the rules, is that when you're going to make a reduction, then you must make sure that then you're when you're going to increase, rather, that you must identify a funding source.
That's why I'm making the body acutely aware of where all the increases are,
Okay,
so that
very
we
good.
all can tick those
Because
off.
I'm
And the other thing, Madam Speaker, is that the applications that the court has submitted, it may even be possible that they would get their notice of award within this month. So depending on how long we go into session, let's not string it out now for that purpose, but but depending on then, they may get an announcement of a grant award between now and then. So,
Okay, I'm listening
Okay.
intently and I'm making notation.
thank you very much, Madam Speaker. All right, thank you very much. We are now on Chapter 4, the Public Defender Service Corporation. The Public Defender Service Corporation is being budgeted at a total amount of $3.15094. Yeah, which is about a $20,000 increase from what they had asked. If you take a look at last year, their funding level may have been lower. That is because they had to meet a cap, and what happened was, because their funding level was lower by about 260 some thousand, they had lapses from the previous year, and so they used that to cover last year's. So if you're comparing budget and you look at last year's authorization, you're going to find it's quite a bit lower, but only because they had spent about $300,000 from the previous year to cover that shortfall. So this brings them up to their current operation. Plus, we also funded the Public Defender Service Corporation. Of course, does not has process servers. They have attorneys that go to meet with clients. They have investigators, and they don't have any single vehicle really available to these individuals. So what we've funded for them in terms of an increase, about a $20,000 increase, is a lease for 2 vehicles. Plus, we got them these digital recorders. Most of the court transcripts now are not even written. They're in CD players and so forth. And so what we've done is we've funded some of these digital recorder players for their attorneys, so they can just listen to the transcripts rather than getting them typed up and written, which costs additional money. So now they're able to be just a little bit more efficient by having these recorders available to them to listen to transcripts and other court proceedings as they prepare for their cases. So it's about a $20,000 increase total over their budget. So any questions? If not, yes, Senator Rector.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Chair. Please be patient with my newbie ignorance on these things. I just, as I'm looking through this, it says federal matching grants in aid, and we have 0. So does that mean that we're not getting any federal matching funds for the Public Defender Service Corporation?
That's correct. Most public defenders, believe it or not, most in the area of law enforcement, most matching grants and grants from the federal government goes towards prosecution, not defense. There are very, very few grants at all for indigent defense within the federal government, federal grant structure under law enforcement. They all go to prosecution. Yep.
Interesting.
Very.
Justice for all as long as you can afford it, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. The next chapter then is Chapter 5, and we start with the Executive Branch Appropriations. The first item on this, of course, is the Office of the Governor. The total appropriation request for the Governor is the total request for executive direction under the Office of the Governor, which is inclusive of some of the smaller sub-offices, such as the Medical Referral Office and the Lieutenant Governor's Office, is $6.872305. This represented an increase over the previous year. We scheduled 4 public hearings for the Office of the Governor, and they were all canceled. They've had either were not available because they were off island, or the principals were under the weather and sick and ill. And we tried to do the hearing 4 times, and we were not able to successfully do that. But regardless, I think as in most instances, because they are, of course, the executive branch is a co-equal branch of this government, we've kind of always paid deference to the request of the executive direction budget request of the governor. And I don't recall, except maybe once or twice, where the legislature has reduced the governor's office appropriation. So we have worked with them. They work and they've worked with us, but we did not have a formal public hearing on this. The other offices that are covered by this executive direction request is the Bureau of Information Technology, Government House, the Bureau of Women's Affairs, and the Guam State Clearinghouse. So these are the other entities covered by this budget. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And the other, this is the budget that will be supported by local funds. The governor's office also has, at its discretion, approximately $4.8 million in compact impact funds that is left over after the allocations are given to the schools, etc. And then, of course, as we've been reading, they also have about approximately $7.8 million in the Office of Economic Adjustment military build-up funding that they've been able to allocate and spend, and some questionably, I guess, but that's not for. So that is a summary of the executive branch request, and I have Senator Uggan, Senator Ada, and then Senator Respicia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I guess my question is, there was a funding mechanism that was provided in this fiscal year's budget for the governor's D.C. office. So this would encompass the appropriation provided here, would also encompass that particular funding mechanism?
I believe so. There was no breakdown line item for a Washington, D.C. office. It was just under Office of the Governor.
Okay, and thank you, Mr. Speaker, for highlighting the $4.8 million in compact impact funds and the $7.8 million in military build-up. But looking at the compact impact funds, I believe we're getting, as a community, $2.8 million more, from 14.2 to 16.8, so or $2.7 million more. So I certainly hope that those resources could possibly address some of Speaker Wampach's concerns as a possibility. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for suggesting that. All right, Senator Ada.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'm really disappointed that you had scheduled 4 times a public hearing for the governor's office budget, and 4 times they failed to show up for one reason or another. And
thank you. I do want to say that the 2 times that they asked us to cancel the hearing, they were off island on the bond deals, and then a couple times they just called and told us that they were not available and for one reason or another. So.
Okay, then 2 times they were off island, and 2 times they failed to show up.
That's still 4, Senator.
And I think, going back to the question that the earlier speaker had raised about the, I know that the governor this year has opened an office in Washington, D.C., and the question was asked, how much is Guam paying for that particular office? Because, and I'm curious about that, because if the office is being open and implying that our Congresswoman is not doing a good enough job, then certainly that's probably something that needs to be discussed more. But I would be very curious as to how much is being spent for the rental of that office. Obviously, it's not under office space rental, because that's only $30,000. That's probably about two months' rent in Washington, D.C., if that many. If it comes under contractual services, here we are trying to close the gap for Department of Education. Other agencies are are coming up short. A penny here, a penny there certainly closes that gap.
There's 3,870,460 pennies. So that's $387,446 for the Washington, D.C. office. We were able to find it.
$300,000 for the Washington office?
387,000.
Oh, $387,000.
Yes.
Wow, that is, I would be very interested to see what the productivity of that office is at the end of the year. But I just wanted to raise that question, Mr. Chairman, because I'm really disappointed that the governor's office didn't show up to at least enlighten the committee on its budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I caught your statement when we were reviewing the judiciary's budget that you wanted to pay deference to a separate but co-equal branch. I'm looking at the appropriations made to the executive branch, and I do not see any transfer authority. Unlike the judiciary, where there's a transfer authority of judiciary appropriation, I'm not seeing any transfer authority of executive branch appropriations, unless
it is
unless it's further back.
It's further back.
Because
correct.
I know you've done a great job at itemizing these appropriations by object
Yes.
classifications. So hypothetically, if when this bill passes, the governor will be able to transfer from within each agency's
Yes.
budget classification by what percentage?
10, I believe.
10, okay. And then the governor would also be able to transfer from one department to another in how
Yes.
you set up the mechanics of this budget?
From the all executive branch appropriations.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's further back. I don't see it further back. I don't want to jump ahead, but I'll take your word for it, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we may have missed it. I mean, but we had it in our.
But in your judiciary,
We'll make sure we
in your
put it
judiciary appropriation, you put that language in
yeah.
judiciary section.
Yeah.
So
So, okay. Well, our intention was not to not give him one.
okay.
We had two versions of the transfer authority, and I know that we when we were finalizing the bill. So we'll make sure that we look at our version and see that when we were cleaning up the bill, we didn't take both out by mistake.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you for
Chairman.
bringing that
Thank
to
you.
our attention. Okay. All right. So Senator Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know, Mr. Chair, that there are some discussions with regards to the amounts that I guess the executive branch was requesting to be set aside or to be used for the Washington office, and whether or not that office was necessary, recognizing that we do already have a congressional representative there. And I must say, Mr. Chair, that in the recent trip that I took to D.C. along with my colleague Senator Barnes, both offices actually worked in tandem and worked and gave us that added advantage of being able to make these meetings and to meet with the individuals that we were able to meet with. I think that this is a welcome compliment. That office is actually a welcome compliment to that of the Congresswoman's office. I see that, and I know that in speaking to both the Congresswoman's staff and also to Terry Mortero, who's out there, they have weekly meetings so that they both can work both sides of DC. At the same time, it's a welcome compliment. Both sides. I see the value that office brings, or just in the trip that and the meetings that Senator Barnes and I were able to make as a result of the coordination that was done by that liaison office, as well as the information that the liaison office had, so that we can prepare for these meetings. It was again a joint effort thing, and this is again because of what we're going to be experiencing over the next few years. This is an added benefit, and I think that the cost analysis on this and the end of this is making sure that there are more people on the ground for us in DC. That we can talk to, that we can rely on to help us move Guam's agenda in D.C. So I have to speak up for that, and I think that's I felt it is, and I feel it, that it's money well spent. I saw it. I saw the value in it. I've been talking to different agencies on some of the information that I gathered as a result of the meetings that they helped to not only to make for Senator Barnes and I, but to help to prepare us with the discussions that were going on amongst the different entities there. So I think I needed to bring that point up there, and if there is some cost-cutting measures that can still happen, then so be it. But I just think that it's money that's well spent there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Blas. Senator Rector.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In some ways, I need to echo the previous speaker's sentiments. DC's one crazy town, and there's tons of people there, talking to people in the administration, talking to people in the Congress and the Senate, and lobbying is, like I said, a crazy business. That being said, I have to say that the Congresswoman her office was able to set up every appointment I asked her to when I was there, and her office alone did a fine job for me. I think at the end of the day, when we get through this, we're going to have to go back and look and see what our priorities are. If it's going to be able to deliver a $300,000 benefit to the people of Guam, or if maybe we're going to use that money, we'll see more benefit by hiring 6 PE specialists for elementary school kids, or by paying for more prescription drugs for our Bonanco. I mean, $300,000 buys a whole heck of a lot of prescriptions. So my question to you is, because this doesn't line out that office, and I think if we do have to cut anywhere, that seems like a pretty safe cut for us, seeing as we have the Congresswoman already there with a very competent staff and a big office. How would we go about deleting that budget if we so decided?
I would think that we would just delete that amount, reference the submission of the governor, where he actually submits his summary, and say that this funding is deleted for the purpose submitted. We're also working in terms of trying to, once we get through this with any changes that are made, put in as an appendix the divisional budgets. And so the governor's office identifies, they're not divisions, but they're offices. So he identifies the budget for Bureau of Human Affairs, Bureau of BIT, Information Technology, and then we could put that as an appendix and then zero that line item out when he has, according to his submission, that amount dedicated for the Washington, D.C. office. So we could do that.
So then let me ask you, is it all, as you're chair of the committee, so that we'll be able to do this at a future date when we get into administrative provisions if we so choose?
Well, if you want to delete that, if you wanted to delete that amount
Yes.
and put it somewhere else, yes, that would be.
We can do that in the future. We don't have to do it right now, is what I'm asking.
No, I think if you don't have a place to put it yet, then you don't have to do it. Or if you just want to cut it out now without putting it elsewhere and just reserving it, you could do that too.
Oh, I'm sure there's 14 other people in this room that could find good uses for that money.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator Rector. Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, no questions on that. Commission on Decolonization is one of the other offices at the in the executive branch. This office is funded. Oh, Senator Ada. Okay, the office is funded with one FTE, which is the director. It is supported by 2 other FTEs that are assigned out of the governor's office to this agency, or at least being detailed to this agency or this commission. We included in this, the OFB recommended the inclusion of a $25,000 for the development of an outreach program to support the decolonization registry. As you know, we have been trying I personally have been working on the decolonization registry, and when we asked Senator Jim Underwood, who is the executive director, what effort can he lend to the decolonization registry, he had mentioned that he does not have any funding other than what he was given, which is just his salary. And so we are proposing that in this budget we have $25,000 for the development of an outreach program. I think that, I don't know whether it was fortuitous or what, but this afternoon or this morning at the University of Guam, Congressman Nick Rahal, for the first time, I think, spoke of decolonization and the right to self-determination for the people of Guam, and that is something that has been, highlighted or is now blipping on the federal government's radar. I spoke with him afterwards, and he also mentioned that they are looking at providing some funding through the Department of Interior to begin the education process if we should move forward on this. So this kind of works in tandem with that, and we hope that we'll be able to get something really going now. And so it's a slight increase. It will allow the current agency to have something to work with, and we're going to try to challenge them on that. So it's the total appropriation is the $89,480 with the health benefit being at $3,548. So any comments on that? Senator Ada, I saw your hand up.
Mr. Chairman, although I did not sit in on the particular public hearing that discussed this budget on the Decolonization Commission, I was watching it on TV. And I thought, again, when the question was asked, well, what has been accomplished this past year and the year before, and what do you project to accomplish? And it was kind of, well, if you give me more money. And quite frankly, I'm just not sure that $89,000 is gonna really address a need. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I guess if I was to prioritize where to put that $89,000, there's been a louder outcry about the Ancestral Lands Commission's difficulties, about the difficulties in the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. I haven't heard too much outcry about this commission on decolonization and whatnot. And I want to move to zero out this budget and to allocate these $89,000 to the Chamorro Land Trust Commission to assist them in getting their program in order, because that program certainly has a much more direct benefit to our people and the people who most need it. So that's my motion, Mr. Chairman, and maybe we can have a little discussion on that.
Yes, thank you very much. There's a motion on the floor to transfer, basically, zero out the appropriation to the Commission on Decolonization, and the reduction in that amount will be transferred to the budget of the Chamorro Land Trust. Is that an accurate? Okay, all right. I had Senator Taitagui, and then I had Senator Cal. Oh, I'm sorry. I had Senator Guthertz first for Senator Ada. Had raised her hand. Senator, and so on. We're now discussing the ADA amendment, and so I'd like to see the hands just so I can take a list. Okay. All right. Okay. Senator Guthertz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate really the concerns of Senator Ada, my colleague, with respect to this matter. I think we all have questions. I know the administrator of this entity, I guess you call it an office. Is it Mr. Underwood, am I correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And Mr. Underwood, as everyone knows, a former senator, a former delegate to the Guam Constitutional Convention. Very, very intelligent man. I'm saddened, though, Mr. Chairman, that there's been so little activity with reference to this matter of self-determination. And I assume it is because of funds. But at the same time, we haven't heard much. We haven't heard requests coming from this office asking for assistance to jumpstart this process. This is a critical need for our territory. To help set a direction for Guam's future, the self-determination vote is very, very important. Until that vote occurs, we really will not be able to set a proper future for Guam's ultimate political status. And I'm very concerned with the military buildup, Mr. Speaker, that we're going to have an onslaught of a population here, perhaps between 40 and 50,000 new folks on Guam. And this issue really should be at the forefront of what we're doing right now. Because if we don't look at this important matter today, it may be too late later. So whatever we can do to move this forward, I support. And if it starts with a small $25,000 amount of money in order to get the word out that people who are qualified need to register, then I think it's money well spent. And yes, the Ancestral Lands Commission and Chamorro Land Trust are important too. But this, we're talking about the very destiny of Guam and the people of Guam. And this vote is very important to help set that direction. So I'm sorry to say I can't support the proposed amendment because of the reasons I've just put forth. Thank you very much.
Senator Uggan, and then Senator Palacios, and then Senator Cabo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I certainly, in recognition of the proposed amendment to delete the funding for the Commission on Decolonization and reallocate it towards the Chamorro Land Trust. First and foremost, as the oversight chair, you certainly are very cognizant of the challenges that the Chamorro Land Trust is undergoing right now at this point in time, and the allocation in here would hopefully support them over the next fiscal year and allow them to be able to transition and be a little bit more accountable, I take it, in terms of distribution of properties. But you know, Mr. Speaker, I certainly oppose any movement to delete the funding for the Commission on Decolonization. I think that you highlighted a statement that was made by Chairman Nick Rahal at the University of Guam during the President's speech. And apparently Chairman Rahal had highlighted, and also it was reinforced by our Congresswoman Madeline Verdalio, that in fact they're both looking at identifying Department of Interior funding for the educational process. If in fact, based on the comments that was provided by both congressional representatives, we're able to push that, or you're able to push that question and see if we can identify the funding, then certainly this situation will proceed, and we'll realize some progress over the course of the next 8 to 12 months in terms of actually allowing for the education process. You've incorporated $25,000 into this budgetary allocation specifically to emphasize the requirement and put additional resources towards the Chamorro Registry. So if, looking at some of the things that have been incorporated in here and the comments that you highlighted about the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee in Congress, I'm hopeful that those are pieces of the puzzle that are now coming together so that ultimately we'll get this plebiscite completed and we'll proceed with the voting process and then ultimately move in the direction of accepting the decision of our people. So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I certainly stand in opposition of this particular motion, and although I recognize the concern of our good colleague, because that continues to be a question. What about performance budgeting? You come before this legislative body, you want us to, the people of Guam, to invest, whether it be $80,000 or $200,000 into your operation of your agency. What have you done in the past year? What do you want to accomplish over the course of the next year, this fiscal year, to ensure the people of Guam that in fact their resources are being expended appropriately? And I think that Senator Ada, my good colleague, has a very legitimate concern as it applies to this commission. But in light of some of the information I just shared with you and reinforced in terms of the statement by Chairman Rahal, I think it's critical that we not stop this process at this point in time. So I stand in opposition of the motion, the amendment. Thank you very much, Mr.
Senator Uggan, Senator Palacios.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of the ADA amendment. $89,480 is 42% of the budget for the Ancestral Land Commission. Now, if you put that money with the proposed budget for the Ancestral Land Commission, it's going to give the Ancestral Land Commission, with tremendous problems, a budget of about $303,772. I mean, that's where that money can be best used. And I challenge any member of this body that oppose the amendment, the other amendment, that nothing noticeable will be done by the Commission on Decolonization in the next 12 months. So either we give it more than $89,000 to be significant, or we take that money and give it to the Ancestral Land Commission where there are tremendous problems. And that's where I'm coming from. It is not that it's not important, but $89,000 is not enough to do what it actually wanted to do. And this is just to maintain the employment of one person, and that's all. With some minor pamphlets here and there and flyers, but nothing significant is going to be done for the $89,000. You put the $89,000 to the Ancestral Land Commission, a lot can be done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Palacios. Senator Cabo.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I rise against the amendment proffered. The budget that we are operating under today for FY 2009, again, if you can recall, one of the last bodies of work that my committee had worked on was on the FY 2009 budget. The original budget as submitted to the body was a $300,000 level for the Commission of Decolonization. And the reason for that, again, was the disappointment that I had in the explanations given by, again, those officials in the executive branch whose mandate was to move forward in the political status of the island. And I remember there was some disappointment in myself, and as I sat down and I looked from the committee table to Senator Underwood, I was very clear in my disappointment on the activities of the body, and that's why, or this office, and that was the reason on the bill that was put forward by the committee, the $300,000 amount. Again, I advised the gentleman that they had to get to work, and we were going to get them the resources for registration as well as education, just to start with. I'm disappointed, again, of course, when the budget bill was ultimately passed, that those increased appropriations were negated, and there was a status quo to what had been originally appropriated for FY08. I was at the luncheon today, and there was a reiteration of the statements made, I guess, at UOG. This was by Congress Lady Berdalio, that there was a movement now in Congress for getting getting appropriations for funding the education for a plebiscite not only in Guam but in other territories. There has been a recognition in Congress that we need to move forward here. Members of this body, you know, I guess we should look in the mirror that we haven't emphasized on moving on self-determination from the standpoint of policymakers and members of the administrative branch and executive branch, so that our people can finally make a decision on what political status they would like to see and where it relates to the United States. I mean, that's something that we should all acknowledge. But again, we all understand that this island is going to change dramatically over the next 10 years. The demographics are going to change dramatically. We're going to have close to 250,000 people here. This island will never be the same. We also know that the federal government, as a result of the increased importance of this territory, and I hate to say it, this territory, unincorporated territory, all eyes are on us. Yeah, colony. This Isla Guam, the colony of the United States. There is a focus by policymakers in the administration in Guam. And this is an opportunity for us to move forward in our quest for self-determination. I'm disappointed at the $89,000 that is currently in this budget, but it's a heck of a lot better than zero. I think that if we were to cross it out and zero this, it would send a bad message, not only as us to our people in regards to our seriousness in moving forward on the quest for self-determination, but it will send a negative signal to the people of the United States, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the administration. I wish I could find an additional funding source somewhere else around here, but I for one, would like to go back to the original appropriation request as of the original substitute bill for FY09. But again, I don't have that means at this point. But be that as it may, I think going down to zero from this amount would serve to be detrimental to both the short-term and long-term interests of the people of Guam. So with that, Mr. Chair, I rise in opposition to this amendment, and again, maybe a little bit later on in the budget, in this budget process, if there are monies that are found, we could try to fortify this appropriation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Cabo. Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think that on one hand, the ADA amendment has merit. It has merit because it is going to send a message to the Commission on Decolonization that they're not doing anywhere near enough to move this political status issue and a resolution to these issues, bring them to some semblance of closure. It'll send a message to the current director that maybe, the legislature is, not maybe, but the legislature is extremely serious about this and unhappy with the results so far. Sends a message that the priority, additional priority needs to be placed in the Chamorro Land Trust Commission beyond what you have been doing, Mr. Chairman, and we're getting to the bottom of having the Chamorro Land Trust Commission and the mandates of those commissions fully implemented. But what I'm concerned about is the unintended consequence. We had a lunch meeting yesterday with Chairman Rahal and the delegation, and Speaker Wampat gave both Senator Guthers and I an opportunity to express a priority checklist to this delegation, our priority checklist in Congress. And this body passed a resolution that called on the recognition of the Chamorro right to self-determination and the need for a just political status with the American system. And one of the ways to achieve this is through this vehicle that was established by the Commission on Decolonization. It's unfortunate that this is an effort that the administration never supported, and I dare anyone to challenge me when I just made that statement. If you recall, in the 27th Guam Legislature, when we went through our own budget proceedings, this commission was not even funded. And so what this legislature had to do is take $150,000 from the Lieutenant Governor's budget and put it into this Commission on Decolonization so they can continue. I just don't think we can be asking Congress to give us these recognitions and have some kind of closure to this historical injustice brought on to the Chamorro people, and not even, and at the same time, and not even want to fund $90,000 worth of general fund money to be able to do something like this. I understand the need for the amendment, but I just don't support it now or never because of the kind of message it will send to Congress. I thank you for the opportunity to express my non-support for that amendment.
Thank you very much, Senator Respicio. Senator Rector.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too rise to speak against the amendment. By the same token, I agree with the previous speaker that, look, I don't think anybody's satisfied with what this agency has accomplished. This is an issue that's been long needed for the Chamorro people, and it hasn't been addressed sufficiently. Will this extra $25,000 help them to move forward in their mission? I sure as shoot hope so. Does the Chamorro Land Trust Commission need more funding so that they can continue to move forward with their mission? Definitely. And this is something I hope to address later on in this budget process. We, year after year, reduce the services, the public structure services to our people, and we rob Peter to pay Paul when we keep passing budgets that don't even keep up with inflation, let alone move forward with new initiatives that we think will improve the quality of life for our people. So hopefully later on we'll come up with some new additional revenue sources that will help to fund these things that we all think are so important. So once again, I rise against this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaker Wampat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I too understand, of course, where our colleague is coming from with the amendment, because I just said something earlier in terms of an amendment that I'm preparing, where we're asking all the different departments and agencies to show that they have spent their monies, wisely. Unfortunately, in this case, it's very difficult for a commission of this nature to even do anything when they don't have the money to support their efforts. We've always supported in terms of words, but we've never actually supported in terms of appropriating the monies for them to function. In light of course, we all know the military buildup. One of the things we always say, and we continue to say, and even in a testimony to Congresswoman Christensen's subcommittee, one of my testimonies that we need to address all these past injustices before we can actually even begin to talk about the military buildup. Many of us have gone to Congress as well to lobby, starting this year. This legislature has gone to and lobbied for self-determination, for the war reparations. Those are all past injustices that needs to be addressed. There is this danger that I really fear, is that with the younger generation now, they're beginning to forget what this commission is all about. They're beginning to forget what our parents, I'm not talking about our ancestors, our parents, what they went through. And I fear that if we don't continue to push this, then soon they too, when we're gone, they too will forget. We are very close. This is the closest now we've ever come to actually getting the attention of Congress, and more importantly, even today. And I was in that, in the presidential lecture hall where Congressman Ray Hall, and he was the only one in all the speakers that have been to the island, not even Congressman Skelton, who spoke there, who was a very powerful congressman in Congress. Congressman Ray Hall was the only one who actually addressed self-determination. And he's got, of course, all of the territories in his committee, and I'm sure he's getting his ears bent, not just by Congresswoman Christensen, because the Puerto Rico delegate has actually been pushing this, and he did indicate that Puerto Rico and Guam are definitely moving in that direction towards their self-determination. So we're very close, as the closest we've ever been. And I really think there's a very strong possibility that there will be funding coming out of the Department of Interior. So in essence, I think we need to act now. And we need to send that message not just to our younger generation, but we need to continue to send the message to Congress that, we're supporting the Commission on Decolonization. Therefore, we're asking that Congress continue to support us in, this in the awareness program. And it's been a struggle, I know, all this time to be able to get people to register. And I have to admit, and I'm embarrassed to admit, that even I, for the longest time, have known about this, and it wasn't even too long ago that I finally registered. And I'm glad I did, and I'm sorry I didn't register earlier. And I think maybe we can all help out by doing the exact same thing that Senator Pangilinan is doing, by actually opening up our offices and allowing that everyone who comes to our office who need to register should be allowed to register. So I'm really sorry. I won't be able to support this amendment. I understand, of course, where the mover of the amendment is coming from. But in this particular case, I think this will truly make a big difference. I mean, it's a tiny amount, but when we continue to support it, we'll see the big difference when the time comes when we're finally going to be able to decide on our self-determination. So thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman.
On the amendment, Speaker Pangilinan, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I definitely understand the frustrations I think that bring about this and the challenge that it presents to us in terms of what this means, what this amendment means. I know the author and I know, where he's coming from. Certainly appreciate it, and it's a challenge to us. When we were going through this budget, we thought about what do we really want to achieve with this commission? But we also wanted to make sure that we didn't throw any money at it that the governor can just take later on because he has no interest in it. And I think that's a statement of fact. As one of my colleagues said, I challenge anyone in the administration or the governor himself to say that he's really interested in this or has even supported it other than what has been asserted by another member of this body. It's just to pay somebody to stay there because for whatever reason the governor wants him to have a job. So I didn't want to just throw money in here. As they said, one of my colleagues mentioned, well, my budget put $300,000 there, so I'm in support of self-determination. But I know that I sat on this commission. I know that when I sat on this commission, I forced that director to call a meeting. I know that when the director called a meeting, I went to the meeting. And I know that we never got a quorum at any of those meetings. But it didn't stop me from continuing to push in my position as a member of that. I also know that one of my colleagues here, when we were discussing, said, I didn't even know I was on the commission. If the people that are supposed to sit on this commission don't even know they're supposed to sit on this commission, what good is throwing money at it? We need the commitment of people that are supposed to sit there. And so people say, oh, you just threw 25,000 is to get something going, to build some awareness, to build a plan, to ask for more money. But I also didn't, as my good colleague, in making this amendment, want to continue to throw good money after bad. But we need the commitment at the top and everybody else that by law sits on that commission, and then to say, I didn't even know. How do we expect the people to know when our leaders don't know? So, yes, I may be derelict and I didn't throw money at this so that I can say I support it. But I know that when I had an obligation, by virtue of being a member of that commission, I met my obligation. And I asked everybody else on that commission to meet their obligation, to demonstrate. At the least, we had meetings called. We couldn't conduct any business because people didn't show up, but I was there to discuss what we could do and how we could get those other leaders that are sitting on that commission to show up. And let's get some work done. Each of the members of that sit on that commission are already paid by government money. We don't need to put more money there. They just have to take the money that we pay them every single day and say, this is also my responsibility, and I'm going to do all I can to make sure everybody else lives up to it. But no, we just go run around. I wish I'm sitting on that commission again. I just don't. Because if I was, people would hear. people would hear that, hey, nobody wants to come to the meetings. People would hear that rather than staying on Guam and calling for a meeting, we're gallivanting, I guess, as one radio host would say, gallivanting everywhere else, or campaigning, or whatever. But we need, again, and I don't want to misspeak here, but I see that look on the face of people as they talk about this, and I try to read what it is, and everyone that spoke, I can read their face, that frustration and the desire for something to happen. But we can't depend on the others to make it happen. We have to say, it is my job, it is my responsibility, it is my duty to make it happen. And I'm hoping, and I know, that this discussion will wake some people up, hopefully, and that all of the things that we now say of our beings, that we supported, we're hoping that everyone's going to listen and hear that, and that support is not going to stop at, I support it because I want more money there, or I don't support it because I want to take money there. Hell no. Maybe this amendment, this amendment to take this money out is the biggest supporter of this effort, because he's doing it to challenge us, to wake us up and make us, not put our money where our mouth is, but put our time, our duty, and our responsibility where our mouth is. That it doesn't always take money. But removing all that money sends a message. And I think it's the wrong message. And that's the only reason why I oppose this. It sends a wrong message. Throwing more money without having people who have a responsibility and a duty to move this forward, throwing more money and letting these people slide and not live up to their obligation is also the wrong message. That's why we're here now. Because we can fund it as much as we want, but when the meetings are called and we don't come, or we don't know that we're supposed to be attending these meetings because we are a member, then it doesn't really help. And so I want to stand in opposition to this. I want to thank the author for making this amendment, having us think about our commitment and what kind of commitment do we have. And hopefully, it won't take money to resolve this matter. Thank you very much, and Sidus Masi.
Juan Pobetsu, Speaker Pangilinan. Is there anyone else wanting to speak on the ADA amendment? If not, Senator Ada, you can close on your amendment.
Madam Chairman, no agradeci todo I conversasyon gini I manggagi piso. Unggan magahit na agree na dangin ta nasuway sa lapit niya sti Commission on Decolonization no benti latsi na message para tanai hujung itauto na stati maninteresawit lo maguzo na put isti na amendment uli na magahit gagay interes gi legislatura na para tasigya mo na ni isti self-determination lo magahil loke na gi mapo siya na sakan tada tanan na commission na edza $50,000 ni para sweldo ni zi un tautaw gi lo imenagahit ni no tada magay tanan na isti na tsotso ni para siya tasuun mo na puristi self-determination na ista 25 centos pesos Lo zangen taatan bentimigay na no kumpli ofisinan Senator Pangilinan ni paro na fanholo mi tauto po ma-register siya gi apa to na registry talek ko na 20 ni menos no 500 pesos a gasta ni pudedzo no. The objective of the amendment was to stir discussion, and to actually put everybody on the task that are we still really interested in moving forward the self-determination. And I think people my colleagues have expressed their positions that they're still very much interested. I think the gentleman from Barrigada, certainly I would agree with him that, throwing money at it without putting our own determination behind the effort is certainly not going to get us anywhere. And if nothing else, then if we stand here and take the position that self-determination is still a very important issue, then I think that the amendment has achieved its objective, and I would therefore withdraw the amendment.
Okay, Senator Ada, that being said, is there a move to withdraw the amendment, or do you want to vote on the amendment?
No, I said I withdraw the amendment.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That last one. Okay, no objection. Anyone else wishing to speak on the overall section of the Commission on Decolonization? If not, Speaker Pangilinan.
Mrs. Marcy, thank you very much. So we've concluded then the discussion on the appropriation for the Commission on Decolonization. The next item is subsection C, the Ancestral Lands Commission. This is a commission, of course, that is charged with the returns of excess lands that have been to original landowners, which have been turned back by the excess land tax of the federal government. This is a status quo budget that was requested by the commission, and there was no additional requests made other than the amount you see here. So, Senator, but we did fund, though, in the past during the discussion, there was a discussion for the need for an additional land abstractor position to assist in the research of the titles of these properties that will be returned, and so it helps facilitate that. So we did provide additional funding for that position in this. So we have Senator Argunen and Senator Muñoz-Barnes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I guess mine is more of an inquisitive question in terms of do we still have property, Mr. Chairman, in the land bank? Are we continuing to receive property being returned by the federal government, or do we still have a certain amount of parcels of property that still have to be divvied out to the people of Guam and the ancestral owners?
Yes. There are no new properties being returned by the federal government. All of the properties that have been returned to the federal government have been placed within the inventory of the Ancestral Lands Commission in two categories. One is property that is placed in the inventory for return to the original landowners, and one which is property returned that were part of what you would call crown lands, in which they're not being returned to the original landowners, but are going to remain in the inventory and are deposited into the land bank, Ancestral Land Bank. That property is being developed by the Ancestral Lands Commission. The income from that property is supposed to then be divided into the individuals whose properties are never going to be returned to the original landowners. The other one is then they are continuing to hold title hearings on the properties of this, on those properties that are eligible to be returned to the original landowners. So they continue to work on that. They have hearings, they perfect titles, do the research, accept the claims, and then when they are ready, they actually transfer these properties. So that is still in the process of happening because they haven't completed distributing all those lands.
Thank you for that update, because a lot of it relates directly to whether, in fact, there's still activity taking place
Oh, yes.
with the Ancestral Lands Commission. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Thank you very much. Senator William Barnes.
Maybe also, Mr. Chair, for being inquisitive in reference to line item number 15. I just wanted to know, based on earlier discussions, there was a provision of why this line item was taken away from another agency. Is there any reason why we're allotting $300 for this line item 15?
When I look at the request, we saw that in there and we didn't change.
I just wanted to make sure, because if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
based on that coming in, it's unless there's spot checks, I don't know.
Yeah,
Because before it wasn't there, and
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I didn't ask that question. Again, I said we basically approved their request with the addition of that one FTE, and in their request they had $300 for drug testing. So
you wouldn't have any objections if that got zeroed out and sent to someone, even if it's minuscule, right?
No, I wouldn't. This is my oversight, and I honestly, I must admit, I couldn't tell you the specific reason why it was taken out. Did you want to move it to miscellaneous?
Yes, I'd like to move it to miscellaneous, please.
Okay.
It's just so that we can be consistent.
Okay, so the $300 item under drug testing will be moved to miscellaneous. Thank you very much. So just Masi, Senator. Okay, any other, Senator Ogden, did you finish? Yes, okay. All right, so any other comments on the ancestral lands? If not, we'll then proceed to the Bureau of Budget and Management Research. This is a BBMR, as we all fondly know as BBMR. This is a request, of course, it's part of the staff offices of the governor's office. The appropriation level was status. Yeah. The FY09 budget was at 1.2 million. The FY 2010 would be at 1.4 was the request. We are funding it at 1.397. This includes 2 additional positions for this department to continue the work of the financial management program that they have. It is a budget analyst 3 and a budget analyst 2 position. These were vacancies in their staffing pattern. In addition, the budget also provides from out of the indirect cost fund the sum of $100,000 from the indirect cost fund, which is this is from that federal grants budget, to develop and automate the budget process. I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, one of the if you go through the data that we've been able to collect and the spreadsheets that we've been able to link and build, we had to input all of that almost manually. I mean, every single position on the government of Guam, every single salary of the government of Guam, we've been able to build that in, take it and do it manually. The departments and agencies kind of have to do the same thing. And so in working with them and discussing it with them, we felt that we could actually build another module within the AS400 so that everyone can upload their documents into this module on the AS400 for budget purposes. We input and load the allocation on the AS400 for the expenditures and the allotment releases. We upload the modules for the expenditures and track those. But when it comes to the preparation of the budget, it's pretty much manual. And so what we have done is we have, from the federal grants, we have actually in the previous years took a portion of the federal grants and deposited into this into this indirect cost. There's a fund balance in that, and it will come out of that fund balance, so it doesn't affect the revenues at all. And so 100,000 of that will be given to BBMR to work with OFB and no staff that will be done in order to have them come to a system of trying to update more and computerize and have the budget process a little bit computerized. And that is the amendment there on section B. Yeah. Yeah. Chris, I wanted to have Mr. Badassi, the director of OFB, just talk a little bit on that amendment, or in the B.
The purpose behind this is really to try and save costs, and I think, we plan to go back after the budget is over and try to quantify how many hours of preparation it takes in each agency to prepare all the documents for the BBMR budget call. And then also, on top of that, they need to also prepare all that information again for the Office of Finance and Budget. And then we take it and then we basically databased all the information that they provided. And it's really doing the same thing 3 or 4 times. And I think we could save a tremendous amount of money, probably 10 times the amount that we're going to try to appropriate here by automating a lot of these processes. And that's the reason for that.
Yeah. Senator Rector.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I couldn't agree with you more on this, and I actually wonder if 100,000 is enough. One of my concerns on this is that we make sure that whatever system that we purchase and develop is integrated for every agency in our government. That's one of our big issues at this point, I think, is we're spending a lot of money on technology, but in piecemeal throughout our different agencies, and then they aren't able to talk to each other, and this system is different from that system. So did you actually, do you have an idea as to whether 100,000 is going to be sufficient, or are we just pulling a number out of the air and hoping it'll work?
Chris?
The amount was kind of pulled out of the air to get it started. So we're going to try to form a committee and then try to develop actually what we need to do as far as that goes. So we're going to work on, the way I would envision it is that we would come together, kind of develop the specs, and then put out a bid and see what kind of response we get as far as what it would take to automate certain parts of the process. And we have to go into discussions about what phases we would do, because there's so many aspects of this budget, and I think salaries being the largest expense of the government of Guam would be probably the first area we would try to go after as far as automating the whole process and preparation of the budgets.
Yeah. The other thing is that the governor's discretionary funds of that ARA funding, a certain portion of that is required that we do something with regards to the implementation of a credible financial management system. And that is part of that funding source is going to support the upgrades at the Department of Education as well. And so this would kind of work in with that so that we can develop the information and the program requirements and so forth, and maybe even just dovetail that building it into that project in terms of the final cost.
And I'd just like to add to that. So the DOE system will actually go link into the AS400 at the end of this. That, as far as when we met with the U.S. Department of Education, that's what they envision the use of that money to be. And they had also mentioned that money could also be used to link in other agencies such as the judiciary and others. But it's at the discretion of the governor, of course.
Thank you. Yes, being the chair of the Committee on Technology, I've been talking to IT people from different agencies, and I've been quite busy, but I was planning in the coming year to get together roundtable discussions to talk about creating systems with all the agencies, and so I'd very much like to be involved in this, and hopefully we can get all the really smart people we have working throughout the public structure together and come up with a structure that works. So I stand in support of your $100,000, and if you need more, I support that too. Penny wise and pound foolish. Thanks.
And I do want to echo your comment about a lot of smart people within the government of Guam. Really, we do have quite a bit of talented people, and you know, sometimes all we need to do is let them do their work. And so we hope that we'll be able to begin some of that with this initiative. So that's the Bureau of Budget Management Research. The Civil Service. Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Barnes, I apologize.
I do apologize, but I think I just opened something here, Mr. Chair, relating back to the last discussion we had previously on the section of deleting 300 and putting it into the list miscellaneous provisions. As I look through the budgets that we've just previously had, there are certain agencies, a lot of the agencies had a zero out on that section, but the Cirujanos office, the education office, certification, GMH, and the governor's office all got funding there. And I don't know if I want to do, I mean, if it's proper to do a motion to do that, because if you look at the big agencies that didn't get it, but yet these smaller divisions got, I think it's only fair that we take that all those provisions out, put it there, because I almost know based on every agency, it's mandatory for them to get in on that submittal, that it comes through that employee.
Okay.
And unless I see it for safety, education, and health in those divisions, but those main divisions, you have it as zero budgeted for. So
okay.
I only want to put some parity into this.
Okay, so you're making an amendment to...
If you can give me 1 minute so
Sure.
we can look at it
Yes.
and talk to it.
Okay.
A 1 minute recess, and so I can talk to you on it.
All right, just a 1 minute recess. Committee of the Whole is back in session. Senator Barnes.
Sizus Mahasi, Mr. Chair, I really appreciate the dialogue that we had during the recess and just being able to work closely with you in the committee. I think it's really important that if you may allow me, that I'll go ahead before I make my amendment in reference to this matter, that we wait to the miscellaneous, when we get to the miscellaneous provision, by that time we would have worked delineation of all the agencies that would require that and those that would not be necessary for, and that we do a breakdown on the miscellaneous provision, if that's all right with my colleagues.
Yes, thank you very much, Senator Barnes. Senator Barnes, what I'll have the committee staff do is pull out run the report on all of the agency budgets and those that have drug testing in their line items. And then we'll have you look at that, and then those agencies, for example, we don't want to pull them out of DPW for bus drivers. We'll leave those in, and those that we want to take out will then come back and, yes, okay? So we'll run that, and we'll allow you to make that amendment when we get back to the miscellaneous provisions. Okay, all right. So thank you very much for that, Senator Barnes. Once again, we're at BBMR. We're discussing the technology aspect of the $100,000 from the indirect cost fund. And anybody else wish to speak? If not, we are now then on the Civil Service Commission. The Civil Service Commission shows a decrease in their budget from FY09 to FY10 of about 3.9. This was a result of the retirement of two senior management positions within the division. We are now funding those positions, continue to provide funding for those for their recruitment, but the people who vacated that were basically at the very top of the scale in the pay, and so the refilling of those positions at the lower entry level is one of the reasons why there is a decrease in that. We are providing the funding for a personnel management administrator as requested by the department. We are also increasing the level of equipment and supplies slightly to the division as requested by them. So that really is the action that has been taken and a recommendation being presented by the body. So any other comments on the Civil Service Commission? Senator Rector?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I rise in support of the additional funding for equipment. Just if I can explain something, as people know, like public hearings at the Civil Service Commission are public and recorded. And currently their equipment is so old that they actually record it to cassette tapes. Now, for those of us in this room, we still remember cassette tapes. And think of them, some of us still think of them as modern technology, but when in fact it really isn't. And it actually adds more cost to the operation of the Civil Service Commission because the recording quality is so bad, you have to actually pay someone to listen to them and transcribe the tapes. Whereas with a good digital recording system, you can run it through DragonSpeak and it'll transcribe itself with minor error corrections. So that's just a good example of being of not being penny wise and pound foolish. You invest a little bit up front for higher quality equipment, and you save money in the long run and give a higher quality product and allow the agency to function at a higher level and serve public employees and management at a better level and more effectively and in a more timely basis, which, as we all know, is very important because justice delayed is, of course, justice denied. So I rise in support of that additional funding. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Any other? Senator Gutherts. Senator Guthertz, we're on the Civil Service Commission.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think the new technology is fine, and I'm glad we've acknowledged that, and we're supporting that. But I also have to speak on behalf of cassette tapes. No. Mr. Speaker, just because something is older technology doesn't mean it's not valuable technology. This is a cassette tape recorder. It is 22 years old. It is made by Sony. I have owned it for 22 years. I use it regularly to record meetings and proceedings, and I have cassette tapes for them. They are still available. They are 49 cents each at various stores on Guam. They work well. There's nothing wrong with them. So my reason for sharing this is simply that, you know, we use what we have. Fortunately, through your leadership, you've been able to identify some funds to assist the Civil Service Commission to get some new technology, and that's great. But let's not dismiss the great strategic thinking that has occurred in the past that developed this kind of technology. It still works, and we have used it in our office regularly for different functions, and I think it still has value. So I just wanted to put a good word in for the older technology, appreciating the new technology as well, because I love technology and I love electronics, but I'm certainly not going to give up or throw away my cassette tape recorder or my cassettes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Guthertz. And I'm sure when the Civil Service Commission tape deck breaks, they can borrow yours. Thank you. All right. Any other comments? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We're now at the Department of Administration. The Department of Administration, if you look at last year's budget, you're going to see a decrease to this year's budget. And the reason for the decrease, again, is the creation of the new Guam Regional Mass Transit Authority. And the Guam Regional Mass Transit Authority, which was previously under the Department of Administration, had, of course, about $240,000 for staff, plus over $2 million in $2.5 million in contractual for the bus service. So that's been moved out of the Department of Administration and is now going to be within the Regional Mass Transit Authority. So that accounts for the decrease in this budget. We have increased the capacity or the request for staffing at the Department of Administration. This is one department that has really been able to do a lot with a very little. And they had 43 vacancies within their division in terms of the reduction in their staff over the years. And even with those reductions, within the last couple of years, the Division of Accounts and the Financial Services Division has been able to manage the work there to provide the necessary reporting to get us to clean audits. But with the additional increase in activity that we see coming down the pike and overtime that we've had to fund for portions of that, for example, when we've had to go into a mode for issuing refund checks or COLA checks, that there's nothing in their budget at all, and the staff level cannot support it during their regular operations. So we have discussed with the director, and we have increased the funding in the Financial Services Division to provide for a controller, an accounting technician 3, an accountant, a management analyst, and a data processing manager, which is quite critical. So these are the additional resources we're giving to this department. We think it's a well-deserved and well-needed, and they've been able to manage really their resources quite well, and I want to congratulate them, but also ask my colleagues to support the proposed increase. Senator Rector.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I rise in support of the additional funding without a doubt and without a question. You know, you say that these folks have done an amazing job and been able to keep up with a reduced staff by a staff reduced by 45 employees, and yet I would beg to differ. The people working there have done an amazing job with limited resources. But with the limited resources they have, they certainly aren't doing the job that the people of Guam deserve. They're having trouble processing applications on a timely basis. They are trouble processing creation of new jobs. The Office of the Public Accountability, we changed their name, right? The Office of Public Accountability was just in my office saying that it took them 6 months to create a new job spec, to put out the announcements, and to go through the whole process. And for her to be able to fill a position, it took over a year from the beginning to the end. And it's not because the folks there don't work extremely hard, because I know each and every one of them do. It's that we're giving one person the job of two in just about every section in this agency, which, as I mentioned before, is truly doing a disservice to everybody on Guam. You know, sometimes folks don't realize what DOA actually does. You know, they think, well, it's not education, and it's not health care, and it's not, you know, it's not public safety, so what do we need it for? Well, DOA is the glue that holds all of these things together. It's the agency that processes everything and makes education and health care and public safety run. And we can't discount this, and we can't marginalize it. And while I support the total amount that you did, I think later on I'm going to look at finding new ways to fund some of those additional positions that this agency has done without for years. So thank you very much. I rise in support of the agency, the new positions that you have funded. Actually, not the new positions, the old positions you've refunded. And hopefully we can come up with some additional resources for this critical agency of our public structure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Senator Blas and then Senator Palacios.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, just basically a question with regards to, I noticed here under the Department of Administration, drug testing charges 0, but recognizing too the responsibility of the Department of Administration in the processing of the hiring of new personnel within the government of Guam, and looking through the budgets for all other agencies, hoping that maybe what we did was we moved those drug testing charges to the different agencies that are going to hire, and then it can be transferred. It's still 0 all the way through. It is a requirement for government service for employees or for applicants to be employed within the government to be drug tested, as well as there is an existing drug-free workplace policy within the government of Guam that allows for drug testing for cause or for reasons. And my concern here is most especially with the Department of Administration and their mandate to be able to qualify these individuals. Where is it anywhere else in the budget, or?
That's one of the things that Senator Muñoz Barnes noticed, and we're running the report from her where each agency had line item budgeted a drug testing component.
Okay.
And we're going to run that. She's going to look at that, and then we're going to appropriate and leave those in, or put money where they're not, but where we think they should be.
Okay.
And so she's going to be working on that amendment.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's the only question I had there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Blas. Senator Palacios.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a minor follow-up on the previous speaker. I pointed that out earlier with respect to, for example, GPD has nothing, and I think the Customs and Quarantine, the Department of Correction, and I think, you know, these are positions that are so-called testing designated position that at any time, even after hiring, they can be subject to drug tests, random drug tests. At any rate, I think that there should be amount there, or maybe put it on the miscellaneous and as needed, allow for the use of that. Now, relevant to that, I'm looking at the Department of Administration. And it's good that there's money to fill vacancies. I think $301,000. Is that on page 56?
Yes.
And that is to, but then this one, again, when the zero test for drug testing is zero, then that's not consistent, assuming that there's going to be new hires.
Yeah.
And one point, one item that I note here also that is not consistent is there's zero on equipment. So if the DOA is anticipating on hiring more staffing, I would assume that they're going to need maybe desks or chairs and things like that. But under DOA equipment, it's zero, and yet they anticipate on hiring people to the tune of $301,000. So I just pointed that out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. With regards to this drug testing, it's been very inconsistent in the budgeting by the departments and agencies. There is the object category called drug testing, and some put it in there. We've also noticed in a couple of agencies where they put it under miscellaneous, as Senator Palacios noted. So it's been inconsistent with that respect, and on those line items, I'll tell you, especially we just kind of went with what was submitted on those line items. But given Senator Barnes's desire to re-examine that, we'll run those lines and try to find exactly where those are. So, okay. The next item under the Department of Administration are the supplemental appropriations that are made to the Department of Administration, but they're not for the operations of the Department of Administration. They really are for specific programs, but it is the Department of Administration that handles all of the accounting, the payment of those programs. So the first item is what we call support of child in custody, and the sum here is these amounts were recommended by the governor's office, and we did not increase these amounts as recommended by the governor's office in the original budget submittal. Support of child in custody is $684,170. Yeah, but this again was an increase from the, but this was presented by the governor from last year's amount of $659. The recommended increase was to $684, and we accepted that. Residential treatment fund goes from $959,000 from last year to the governor's submittal this year of $1.2 million, and that was accepted. The government claims fund has been increased to $100,000 from last year's appropriation of $94,176. Some of these amounts were the 5% reserve, I think, and so forth. I have Senator Rector and Senator Cruz on the government claims fund.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Do you have any information as to how much is currently being requested from the government claims fund? Did we get that report? Because I really don't believe that this 100,000 is going to be sufficient. I mean, I understand that it's never been, but that doesn't mean that now that we have a little bit to at least make it more reasonable, because these people keep waiting and waiting, and the mantra's been justice delayed is justice denied, and for sure, I mean, these people have been waiting for some kind of compensation, and if we don't put enough money in it at the beginning,
would you like to call for a short recess? I think we can find that information pretty quickly.
I'll move for a short recess, please.
Okay, thank you. We'll be in a short recess. Committee of the Whole is back in session. We're continuing to dialogue with the Department of Administration to get the specific details of the payments of the Government Claims Fund and trying to get a historical reference on that and what's owed right now and so forth. So I would like to ask for the Majority Leader, maybe if we just get a motion to recess till tomorrow. We'll come back with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we recess till tomorrow morning at 9.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. The motion carries. No objections. We'll be back at 9 a.m. Thank you, Talud. No dan si Dus Mosi Todo Samsung.